As a member of the Moon Barbarians, we are naturally protected by the moon. Under the shroud of moonlight, you cannot harm me. In an almost mocking manner, Moon Barbarian, holding a bone staff, engaged in fierce combat with Little White in the sky. Cloaked in moonlight, wielding the bone staff, her each strike seemed to shatter the sky, causing space itself to tremble repeatedly. On the other hand, Little White could not help but furrow. The reason for this was that Little White's attacks struggled to break through the cloak of moonlight. Though it was merely a faint halo, it seemed impenetrable. The cold breath breathed by Little White melted away as they approached Moon Barbarian. What frustrated Little White even more was the agility of her opponent. It was challenging to hit her with breath attacks alone. What a troublesome opponent. Thinking this, Little White swung her tail. With a deafening snap, as if the very air exploded, an enormous frost-covered tail, crossing space, slammed near Moon Barbarian. How strange. Frowning, Moon Barbarian immediately pulled back. She found it really hard to comprehend how Little White's tail, despite several hundreds of meters between them, could reach her in an instant, as if crossing space. When she tried to counterattack, the ice tail turned into a flurry of snowflakes, leaving her shocked and stupefied. Feeling helpless, Moon Barbarian could only continue to evade. Suddenly, crack, a cracking sound echoed, bringing a drastic change in Moon Barbarian's expression, leaving her shocked. How is this possible? She instinctively exclaimed as she noticed the faint moonlight enveloping her dissipating. What? Still in disbelief, she felt a chill creeping in, her body stiffening in an instant. Right at that very moment, an ice-blue dragon tail suddenly flashed before her eyes. With a thunderous crash, Moon Barbarian's body was ruthlessly smashed to the ground like a cannonball. Adding more to the injury, she also spurted a mouthful of blood. Despite this, Moon Barbarian ignored her injuries and stared blankly at the bright moon in the night sky instead. Is the moon god no longer protecting us? Questioning in a daze, Moon Barbarian could already a biting cold chill penetrating her bones and even soul. The moonlight's protection was crucial for resisting negative effects. In the battle with Little White, the thing to be most afraid about was the bone-chilling cold. Such cold could slow reactions, which could further worsen with continued exposure until one was completely frozen. This was why many experts avoided fighting ice-attribute mutant beasts. Unlike the violent nature of fire, the invisible erosion of ice was truly terrifying. Clenching her teeth, Moon Barbarian crawled out from the crater and looked at Little White in the sky before raising her bone staff. Moments later, with a surge of her spiritual energy, another layer of cold and serene moonlight enveloped her, but before she could rejoice, Little White attacked again. Gripping the bone staff tightly, she promptly unleashed her spiritual energy. Simultaneously, Little White opened her mouth, revealing a glow deep in its throat. The descent of the moon goddess, ultimate ice breath, as both shouted their techniques, a massive amount of energy rapidly converged around the two. However, in the next moment, Moon Barbarian's face changed drastically, because the moment she gathered her spiritual energy, the moonlight shrouding her suddenly dimmed. Even the usually calm and composed Moon Barbarian was stunned. Furthermore, lacking experience in cursing, she could only blink in bewilderment. A biting cold invaded her body, covering her body in a layer of chilling frost before she could unleash her powerful move. And before she could break free, an ice-blue beam shot through the air. Boom. Like waves of the sea, it continuously struck the frozen Moon Barbarian, again and again. Looking up, two ice-blue streams spread along the sides of the frozen Moon Barbarian, freezing the ground, the sky, and even the invisible wind. Everything was frozen, creating a world of ice spanning across several kilometers. I feel a bit sorry for her. Yuziyu, rooted deep within the white mist, could not help but purse his lips into a smile. This woman called Moon Barbarian did have some skills, but unfortunately for her, the moonlight she relied on was truly indifferent to her. With a playful smile, Yuziyu slowly lifted his head, gazing into the depths of the night sky. Faintly, he could see a giant tree waving at him. "In a few days, I'll come to visit you," muttering to himself, Wuxia glanced at the battlefield. The ground was dyed red in blood, with severed and mutilated limbs and parts of bodies lying here and there. Cries of sorrow and despair filled the battlefield. Hiya! At the sight of this gruesome scene, Wuxia could not help but sigh. He felt it was about time to wrap things up. He mainly intended to intimidate and subdue the strong. His goal was to attract the greedy mutant beasts and even the barbarian clan using his aura, and then punish them through war. It had been achieved. Now, he believed it was time to bring down the curtains on it. Moreover, turning his gaze slowly, Wuxia looked at a towering figure wielding a toothed club, veins bulging, and a frenzied expression. Come on, try to stop me from getting closer. No matter how you try to stop me, haven't I still come?" With an extremely arrogant laugh, the barbarian king raised his toothed club high, seemingly venting his excitement. At the same time, a surge of spiritual energy erupted from him before a massive storm manifested around him. At this moment, the barbarian king resembled a god of war. Boom, 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 his momentum was growing more and more terrifying by the moment. Even the surrounding mist was pushed away by his aura. Faintly, the roars of myriad beasts echoed behind him. "Come on. Let me take you back as our clan's holy relic." Laughing manically, this barbarian looked at Wuxia's towering form with unconcealed greed. The bark, flowing with a prismatic glow, appeared like a magnificent garment. The willow branches, swaying in the sky, resembled divine chains. Meanwhile, the willow leaves, sharp as blades, shimmered with a starlit glow. Wuxia's towering form truly appeared as a divine tree in every sense. Even in the previous era, a divine tree was exceedingly rare. If a divine tree managed to reach its peak, it could rival the legendary ancient beings. The eternal blue lotus, the enlightenment Bodhi tree, these divine objects were coveted even by the most powerful beings. This tree monster had the potential to reach such unparalleled heights. Even if there was only a 1 in a billion chance, the possibility still existed. Realizing this, one could imagine the barbarian king's excitement. Noticing the barely perceptible glint of greed in the barbarian king's eyes, Wuxia could not help but smile. Only, the smile was cold. For some reason, even someone as powerful as the barbarian king could not help but shudder, a chill rising from his feet. Ha! Suspicious and curious, the barbarian king looked towards the giant tree shrouded in the white mist not far away. Although the mist obscured vision, the mere 200 to 300 meters of distance made no difference to the barbarian king. However, at this moment, his eyes promptly narrowed, for in his gaze, countless roots rose from the ground. These roots intertwined and wove together, as a slender figure silently emerged from the mist in the blink of an eye. Huh! Seeing this, the barbarian king could not help but laugh and ask in a mocking manner, "Do beings like you also believe in the idea that the human form is the Tao body mandated by heaven?" "Of course not." Shaking his head slightly, the slender figure in the mist slowly approached. As Wuxia casually explained, "I just find it more convenient to converse with you in this form." As he spoke, the slender figure dissipated again, turning back into thousands of roots. At the same time, the thick trunk of Wuxia's true form began to writhe. In a moment, a lifelike, giant face emerged on the tree trunk, staring directly at the barbarian king. "If you prefer, I can be like this too." Humph! Seeing Wuxia's attitude, the barbarian king could not help but arrogantly smile and ask, "So, you agree to come back with me and become our clan's holy relic?" While speaking, the barbarian king lifted the menacing club in his hand, his threat unmistakable. However, the next second, the barbarian king was disappointed, because at that moment, he saw only cold indifference on the giant face, a deep and profound indifference. In that indifference, there was not even a trace of disdain. In that fleeting moment, it seemed that the barbarian king was not even worthy of a direct glance. This nearly dismissive attitude made the barbarian king tighten his grip on the toothed club. Crack, crack, the barbarian king's veins bulged, and cracking sound echoed from the club, seemingly unable to bear his strength. At this moment, a faint voice suddenly echoed within the mist, "Do you know, I've always wondered if there's a possibility for us to coexist peacefully. But now, I've realized, aside from using force to suppress, it seems I have no other way. Not just you, but even the humans and mutant beasts look at me with such greed and disgust, as if they can't wait to tear me apart. Sometimes, I wonder if I'm too cruel, instigating wars again and again. But now I think, if I don't take action, and you grow stronger, won't you all eventually unite against me?" Listening quietly, the barbarian king could not help but sneer and stated, "Haven't you realized the root of the problem yet? Your greatest mistake is being a heaven and earth spirit tree. Your existence is a blatant temptation to any being. Not just us, but even your current subordinates. If one day, you're gravely injured, how many of your current followers will still stand by you?" Hearing this, Wuxia couldn't help but narrow his eyes. This was something he did not want to think about and something he dared not think about. In the face of a supreme treasure, all emotions could be devoured by greed. Perhaps only Ling Air and Nine Tails would always stay by his side. Hiya, heaving a long, emotional sigh, Wuxia reaffirmed his understanding of his existence. His fate with countless strong entities in the world was already sealed. Wealth drove people's hearts, let alone a naturally born spirit tree like him. The more he cultivated, the greater his allure to the strong. Wuxia had no doubt that if he ever attained the Tao, he would face the onslaught of thousands, if not more, powerful experts. "I see, as I continue to grow, I'm not much different from the heaven-connecting Jinmu." Sighing in his heart, a cold gleam flashed in Wuxia's eyes. In the past, he might not have had a solution. But now, with the Void Clan at his disposal, how could he not have a way? If necessary, he could lead the Void Clan to wage war against the myriad races. All he needed to do was take advantage of the chaos to become eternal. By then, whether the very heavens collapsed, or the earth shattered, he would remain indestructible. "Hoo!" Wuxia took a long, deep breath, feeling a sense of relief. He had no regrets about the 2 invasions of the continent. It was just that he was lucky and slightly stronger. If his luck had been worse, his body would have been chopped to pieces and displayed before various powerful experts. Thinking of this, Wuxia's eyes grew colder. A chill filled his gaze as he looked at the barbarian king. "Thank you for answering my questions. But now, it's time for the game to end." At these whispered words, the barbarian king's heart instinctively trembled, an indescribable terror suddenly engulfing him. Swoosh, a silver streak flashed past his eyes, leaving him no time to react or dodge. The next moment, the barbarian king felt a sudden sharp pain coming from his chest. When he looked down, to his horror and disbelief, he saw that a silver willow branch, crackling with electricity, had pierced his heart. "You," in a voice filled with disbelief, the barbarian king seemed to realize something, and his face changed dramatically. "How is it possible? You've already reached this stage. There's nothing impossible about it," Wuxia suddenly interrupted in a cold voice. But then, as if recalling something, a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Hurry, use your best move. If you don't, you'll never have another chance." Wuxia's mocking laughter echoed in the void, causing the barbarian king's pupils to dilate in horror. In the past, Wuxia would never have allowed, let alone encouraged the barbarian king to unleash his final trump card. However, times have changed. The current Wuxia was confident and had the ability to withstand the barbarian king's trump card. After all, Wuxia had now stepped into Tier 5. What was more terrifying was that Wuxia's strength, compared to other Tier 5 transcendents, was absolutely unmatched. Since the beginning of his cultivation, strengthened by evolution points, Wuxia had almost maintained an edge above his peers, becoming almost invincible in the same tier. No, not almost, he was absolutely invincible at the same tier. Even now, even if he had just stepped into Tier 5, things remained the same. Wuxia could confidently say that even some seasoned Tier 5 transcendents would find it difficult to battle him. This was Wuxia's true foundation. In terms of real combat power, even if he had not exceeded Tier 4, he still held a domineering ground. With all these thoughts flashing in his mind, Wuxia could not help but smile in his heart. Then, his spiritual energy surged. Boom! In an instant, the entire continent trembled. Actually, even the nearby continent, Europe, trembled violently. It was terrifying, immensely terrifying. His soaring aura skyrocketed straight to the stars before a vast and colossal shadow of a tree suddenly appeared deep in the sky. It was vast and magnificent, truly capable of covering the sky and obscuring the moon, dimming even the starlight. At this point, Wuxia no longer suppressed his true form. Boom, 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 Wuxia's roots started spreading in all directions, overturning soil and even huge rocks. Swish, swish, swish one after another, Wuxia's countless rootlets danced in the vast mist like countless tentacles. Ft. A mournful despair echoed through the mist as a war elephant was instantly locked down by one of Wuxia's roots without any resistance. Immediately after, visibly, the massive body of the war elephant began to wither away. Not only flesh and blood, but even spiritual energy and vitality were completely swallowed. And all of this happened in just a few breaths. However, this was only the beginning. Roar, 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 mournful wails and screeches echoed through the mist to no end as tens of thousands of mutant beasts became nutrients for Wuxia's growth. Of course, during this, Wuxia's spiritual energy was also continuously skyrocketing. Along with it, the lake of vitality in the pocket of vitality continued expanding at a rapid pace. Compared to Wuxia's countless tree roots wildly dancing like tentacles, Wuxia's own body continued to rise. 500 meters. 1,000 meters. 2,000 meters. At this moment, Wuxia finally revealed part of his true form. Accompanied by the appearance of this immense stature, boom, the sky over the entire continent trembled slightly with a deafening boom, before an indescribable suction appeared in the sky. Looking up, a vortex of spiritual energy, capable of affecting nearly half of the continent, manifested above Wuxia's head visible to the naked eyes. Red as fire, blue as ice, silver like lightning, several different attributes of spiritual energy painted the vortex into a colorful spectacle. Is this the true form of the tree monster? Muttering to himself, the barbarian king's face turned pale. At this moment, the thought of sacrificing everything, even using the resurrection of barbarian ancestor, was instantly extinguished. How can I possibly win against that? It's impossible. Forget sacrificing everything or resurrection the barbarian ancestor, even if I stepped into Tier 5. I might not necessarily defeat this monster. And at the same time, in Africa and Europe, countless beings from these two continents raised their heads and looked towards the deep sky. They could not see Wuxia's true form, but the towering shadow of the tree made each and every creature stare in awe. In Europe, deep within the Vatican, the Pope, who had long resided in the palace, slowly raised his head and looked towards the depths of the sky. What in God's name is this? The Pope, muttering to himself, could not help but have his face turn slightly pale as he gazed at the giant tree shadow. That unparalleled aura. That unspeakable terror. My God! Are you kidding me? How is this possible? Amidst exclamations, countless humans looked on in horror, their faces pale, staring fearfully at the towering tree shadow that seemed to block out the sky. In the current era of cultivation, the sight of such projections was rare. This was the manifestation of an expert's potential. The stronger they were, the more terrifying was their power of potential. However, now, looking at the sky covered by this shadow, countless people found it difficult to imagine just how terrifying this existence truly was. the peak of Tier 4 or that indescribable Tier 5? No one knows, and no one dares to imagine. In the tranquil night, rooted along the coast of Africa, Wuxia's body became increasingly radiant and bright. Amidst the flowing halo of 5 colors, he appeared like a towering pillar that pierced through the sky. Thousands of meters tall, Wuxia's true form had an indescribable majesty. It gave the impression of a skyscraper towering between heaven and earth. And in the sky, in the depths unseen by clouds, Wuxia's canopy expanded to tens of kilometers, even close to 100 kilometers. Swoosh, as Wuxia breathed deeply, the vortex with a diameter of over tens of kilometers in the depth of the sky, rotated continuously, devouring all spiritual energy. Faintly, it felt that the vortex was the physical manifestation of Wuxia's breath. It was indescribably terrifying. At the same time, Wuxia no longer restrained his oppressive spiritual energy, which erupted instantly. Boom, his aura, like a giant hammer, struck the heart, sending countless mutant beasts trembling in fear. Even mighty and powerful mutant beast races like war elephants prostrated themselves on the ground at this moment, afraid to move. However, what no one knew was that Wuxia's current posture was only at the peak of Tier 4, just the peak of Tier 4. However, his peak of Tier 4 surpassed the understanding of the world. Smirking, Wuxia looked down at the earth, at a tiny figure, the barbarian king, and asked, his deep voice resonating throughout the world, "Now, aren't you going to use your trump card?" It sounded like a question, but the indescribable pressure had already turned tangible. Boom, with a thunderous clap, the space where the barbarian king stood collapsed as if imploding, and the substantial pressure instantly crashed into the barbarian king's chest. Spurting a mouthful of crimson blood, the barbarian king's entire body was sent flying, landing in a sorry state on the ground, his face full of disbelief. "No, this is impossible." Still in disbelief, Barbarian King's face turned increasingly pale as he looked at the towering figure that covered most of the battlefield. "Ha ha ha," Wuxia let out a rare laugh. Then suddenly, his tone changed, and he coldly sneered, "Nothing is impossible. If you want to blame something, blame your own weakness." At the drop of these words, one of Wuxia's roots transformed into a humongous python, that swiftly coiled around the barbarian king, who had already lost his fighting spirit, and threw him into the pocket of life. Within the pocket of life, there were creatures like Slytherin and Leviathan suppressing him. Even someone as strong as the barbarian king could not stir up any trouble there. In addition, the barbarian king had already lost his will to fight, and his battle strength had diminished by 30 to 40%. Sighing, Wuxia wondered if he had gone too far, tormenting a peerless powerhouse to such a state. But, oh well, shaking his head, Wuxia decided not to think about it anymore. Given his current stature, the barbarian king was already quite formidable. One must know that even when only revealing strength comparable to the peak of Tier 4, Wuxia's combat power could rival Tier 5 transcendence. Such a terrifying aura was not something ordinary transcendence could withstand. Moreover, after having his heart pierced by Wuxia, the barbarian king had lost more than half of his spiritual energy. Even with time to recuperate, such an injury would be difficult to recover from, despite barbarian king's resilient body. Exhaling a long, deep breath and looking at the ground-calming battlefield, Wuxia could not help but narrow his eyes. As far as his eyes could see, thousands of mutant beasts of the African continent lay prostrate on the ground in submission, their bodies trembling. These were the ones fortunate enough to have survived. Nearly hundreds of thousands of mutant beasts had died at Wuxia's countless tentacle-like tendrils. The horrifying scene had frightened not only the mutant beasts from this continent but even those under Wuxia's command. Master is becoming more and more terrifying. Indeed, I can no longer see through Master. In a rare moment of conversation, Nine Tails and White Tiger exchanged glances, their eyes filled with shock. But just then, as if noticing something, Nine Tails suddenly raised her eyes, looking at a yellowish-brown vortex in the sky. Old Bull is here. With a sudden burst of laughter, an overwhelming aura suddenly erupted, filling the sky. Boom! In an instant, the sky trembled and started to distort. At that moment, if anyone were nearby, they would certainly feel an immense pressure weighing down on their bodies, making them feel as heavy as if filled with lead. This was the gravitational force, a very formidable power. After breaking through to Tier 4, Bull Demon had finally integrated this power into his own. He had now obtained the potential of gravity. Thump, taking a step forward, Bull Demon's fiendish humanoid figure with the head of a bull appeared in the eyes of countless mutant beasts. Carrying an axe on his shoulder, he seemed both majestic and terrifying. However, the most noticeable thing was the phantom of the vortex behind him, which appeared no different than a black hole, with electric arcs crisscrossing inside it. Looking at this vortex, it seemed as if even the light was being pulled into it, turning everything behind Bull Demon into darkness. It was this continuously swirling black vortex that distorted space itself. Is there anyone who dares to fight me? Appearing somewhat excited, Bull Demon, who had just emerged from the pocket of earth, swung the massive axe on his shoulder towards the sky. Swish! Immediately, a several hundred feet long crack tore open the sky. For a moment, half the sky seemed to be split into two by him. However, right then, as if realizing something, Bull Demon suddenly paused. He looked down at the thousands of mutant beasts prostrating before him and then turned to glance at an enormous towering tree, far larger than any he had ever seen. Immediately, the corner of Bull Demon's eyes twitched. Don't tell me, the battle is already over, Master. What do you think? A playful voice echoed through the void, causing the entire world to tremble. At this moment, looking at Bull Demon with interest, Wuxia focused his eyes on here before a series of information flooded his sight. Race, Mutant Wild Buffalo rank, Tier 4 innate talent, Crescent Bull horns. His horns, resembling crescent moons, have continually evolved and now serve as Bull Demon's true innate weapon. Unique ability, Gravity Field. He can freely control the gravity within a certain space, decreasing to zero gravity to even 100 times the gravity easily. Beast Form, planting his forelimbs on the ground, he can revert to his true beast form, greatly enhancing his strength and speed. Absolute Black Hole, the culmination of his understanding of gravity has formed a black hole which is capable of absorbing all attacks, though it has its limits. As Bull Demon grows stronger, so does the limit of this black hole. After taking a deep look at Bull Demon's current status screen, Wuxia found it intriguing. Bull Demon's temperament is indeed very similar to mine. He has begun to conceal his true strength. His crescent bull horns has already become fearsome innate weapons, yet he has restrained the sharpness of his horns, and instead used the black hole to draw the attention of the stronger transcendence. Not bad. Secretly praising it in his heart, Wuxia liked Bull Demon's rough yet subtle and steady nature. I guess after suffering a loss at the hands of humans last time, Bull Demon had indeed reflected on himself. With this thought, Wuxia's branch suddenly swished through the air, creating a thunderous bang. Then, much to the astonishment of countless mutant beasts, a willow branch, like a divine chain, tore through the sky and shot towards the distance. Moments later, amidst a despairing cry, the massive black war elephant was brought back by Wuxia's branch like a helpless lamb. The black war elephant was in a miserable state. It was covered in blood, and one of its ivory tusks had a horizontal crack running almost to the midpoint. Its once beautiful tusk seemed on the verge of breaking. You've just broken through, and I haven't prepared a gift for you. I'll grant you this piece of ivory, go to Old Ninth to forge a good weapon. Saying this, Wuxia used the branch to break off the black war elephant's tusk and tossed it to Bull Demon. Thank you, Master. Bull Demon happily accepted it. Given his discerning eyes, he could naturally tell that his master was creating a show. In front of the thousands of mutant beasts, he was establishing an image of clear rewards and punishments to attract more mutant beasts to join Misty Mountains. The night gradually grew darker and darker, yet the southern side of this continent was as bright as day. At the south stood a towering tree, piercing through the clouds, like a skyscraper. It was surrounded by colorful glows, painting the world in all kinds of colors. Rohar, 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 roars and growls of mutant beasts echoed on the ground as they began cleaning up the battlefield in an orderly manner. The carcasses were being dragged by the mutant beasts towards the pocket of ice. The pocket of ice was a land of extreme cold, which would help in preserving these carcasses from decaying. Not to mention, with these carcasses, Misty Mountain's food supply was secured for several months or even half a year. Of course, food full of spiritual energy was considered a luxury for most mutant beasts. As a matter of fact, under Uziyu's command, his mutant beasts would never devour the carcass of their comrades. With Uziyu's aura acting as a signpost, his mutant beasts could distinguish between friend and foe at a glance, even if they had not met each other before. In fact, most of the carcasses were taken back by their respective clans. For example, the Tiger clan would place their comrade's carcass into a blood pool. Once the carcass decomposed into blood, it would continuously accumulate power. Later, if a prodigy was born in the Tiger clan, they could go to the blood pool to cleanse their bloodline. This was the foundation of their clan. It might not seem significant now, but in 1,000 or even 10,000 years, prodigies from the Tiger clan would continuously emerge. The top-tier dragon clan also practiced this tradition, similarly. The famous dragon tomb of the dragon clan followed this principle. However, the dragon clan's methods were more intricate and truly could not be replicated by other races. Hiya, heaving a sigh, Uziyu regretfully glanced at the battlefield before shifting his gaze to Nine Tails not far away. Master, after a simple tally, we found that Misty Mountains suffered a 40% loss, with many commanders injured. But, compared to our losses, our gains have exceeded expectations. At this point, Nine Tails' tone changed, revealing a hint of joy. According to our tally, we've captured 8 and killed 2 natural disaster class tier for transcendence alive, whereas others had managed to escape with serious injuries. Hearing this, Uziyu's eyes lit up. He had not expected to capture 8 natural disaster class creatures alive. After all, natural disaster class transcendence possessed extremely mystic and powerful means. Capturing them alive, let alone killing them, was extremely difficult. Yet they have captured a total of 8. This showed the combat strength of Uziyu's commanders. He, grinning, Uziyu praised, not bad. Once this is over, I will reward you all accordingly. Thank you, Master. Responding, Nine Tails presented the compiled list. With a quick glance, Uziyu understood the situation. All 4 natural disaster class transcendents of the Barbarian clan, including Barbarian King and Moon Barbarian, were captured alive. Additionally, the Black War Elephant and a Snow Lion King were also defeated by Dark King and Little Tenth. The other 2 natural disaster class transcendents fell at the hands of Golden Ant and Nine Tails. 8 natural disaster class transcendents, Uziyu's eyes could not help but flicker as he made calculations. But just then, Uziyu's eyes narrowed slightly, as if sensing something. No, there should be a 9th natural disaster class transcendent. As he said this, Uziyu's roots suddenly surged with spiritual energy. Swoosh, 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 with one swishing sound after another, 9 of Uziyu's willow branches, entwined with electric arcs, transformed into silver bolts of lightning, shooting into the darkness. Hiss, hiss, suddenly, hisses shook the night sky. Looking towards the source, one could see a black shadow stretching towards the horizon. Where do you think you're going? Suddenly, a calm and gentle voice echoed through the night sky, causing the shadowy figure's face to change drastically. I was just looking, with a touch of horror, the shadowy figure's speed increased drastically, seemingly desperate. At the same time, Uziyu noticed ripples in the space, like waves stirred by fish in water, looking extraordinarily eerie. To be able to merge with space, no wonder you dared to spy on me. Smiling in his heart, Yu's pupils suddenly contracted. The next moment, deafening rumbles shook the ground as a purple python suddenly flashed by, much to the horror of countless mutant beasts. At a closer look, it was actually a gigantic purple boa. Its aura alone was cold enough to freeze the soul. Its snake eyes, occasionally gleaming with a purple glimmer, were locked onto the shadowy figure fleeing in the distance. Go, catch it. Hearing Yu's soft voice, a playful glint flashed in the purple python's eyes, as if it was sentient, and immediately gave out an increasingly ferocious hiss, making even the distant shadowy figure shudder in fear. At that moment, Nine-Tails finally couldn't hold her curiosity and asked, glancing in confusion at the disappearing shadow in the horizon, "Master, what is that?" "It's a little snake," giving a short answer. Yu added further, "A pretty good snake." Murmuring, Yu recalled the status screen that had flashed by earlier. Race, Mutant Soaring Snake Rank, Tier 4. Innate Talent, Venomous Fangs. Its fangs are incomparable sharp enough to tear through any defense and inject lethal neurotoxin, one so potent that even Tier 4 Transcendence couldn't withstand. Unique ability, Poison Eater. It grows by absorbing toxins. The more terrifying the toxin, the more delicious it finds it. Spatial Scales. Its black as ink scales seem to possess the properties of space, capable of significantly boosting its speed and hiding its presence. Deathly Poison Mist. It can exhale a poison mist that dissolves everything, something ordinary beings can withstand. This little guy does indeed have the qualifications to be a member of Sentinels. After a short chuckle, Yu no longer paid any attention to the soaring snake. He had complete confidence in the root-transformed purple python. Furthermore, the soaring snake did not possess the most mysterious spatial attribute and could not actually teleport. Even if it did, so what? The purple python, formed from Yu's roots, was not just about infinite extension, it also possessed terrifying perception and the speed to tear through space. Everything about it destined the purple python, formed from Yu's roots, to be the most formidable hunter. The prey targeted by it might escape, but this little guy isn't one of them. So, after a brief glance, Yu calmed his mind and began to organize the harvests of the past few days. My evolution points have reached 4 billion, the spiritual energy reserves has increased in just a few months, and is boundless like a sea, Yu muttered to himself, earnestly sensing the spiritual energy within him. His endless spiritual energy continuously surged and gathered into a vast ocean that seemed to be stretched on infinitely. At the center of this ocean of spiritual energy was a few willow leaves floating quietly like lone boats. Each time a wave of spiritual energy rolled up, it washed away some of the impurities on the willow leaves, making them even more transparent. This was Yu's greatest trump card, the flying willow leaf blades. One of these flying willow leaf blades had even been refined into a sentient artifact. Ashish, I'll be using sentient artifact instead of psychic weapon from now on to preserve the meaning that it's sentient. Previously I thought it was connected to mind and soul, so I named it psychic weapon. If one looked closely at it, they would notice a massive whale's phantom around this blood-red yet crystal-clear willow leaf. Who, as if sensing Yu's gaze, this willow leaf let out a long, lonely cry. It was the whale's song, also an expression of joy. Come here. Just as Yu called out, a deafening rumble shook Yu's tree body as a glowing blood-red willow leaf slowly rose from Yu's massive form. However, just as this willow leaf rose, it sent ripples through space. Soon afterward, much to the horror of the mutant beasts, cracks began to appear in space. This was caused by the sharp aura which had become tangible. So, even without releasing any killing intent, it was still too much for space to bear. In other words, this was the invisible aura emitted by this weapon alone. Looking up, one could see that within a 100-meter radius centered on this willow leaf, the space was filled with cracks. The sharp aura seemed to pierce the soul, causing even Nine-Tails to tremble slightly. Not only Nine Tails, but even Bull Demon, White Tiger, Golden Ant, Little Tenth, all natural disaster class transcendents under Yuziu's command lowered their heads in unison, their faces showing evident reverence towards the glowing red willow leaf that even space could not bear. Little guy, you really are restless. As Yuziu gave a playful remark to the sentient artifact, a smile flickered in the depths of Yuziu's eyes. It was hard to gauge loyalty, but it could be reinforced over time. Like now, Yuziu brought out this sentient artifact, making it clear to many mutant beasts that until they had means to resist Yuziu's sentient artifact, they had to stay in line. Of course, Yuziu did not mind them having their own plans and thoughts, for example, developing their clans, forming alliances. However, Yuziu would never, ever tolerate betrayal. Not just actions, but even the thought of betraying was not allowed to exist. Thus, Yuziu's reinforcement was particularly important. In this extraordinary world, strength was ultimately paramount. This sentient artifact can indeed be refined further. Additionally, the offensive method of the flying willow leaf blades must also be strengthened. Muttering to himself, Yuziu promptly sprang into action. His spiritual energy surged, shaking the vortex of spiritual energy blanketing the night sky above Yuziu's main body. Immediately afterward, with a shrill swishing sound, as if something was tearing through space, Yuziu's blood-red willow leaf suddenly flew up, transforming into a streak of blood-red light. Then, with a thunderous roar, the vast spiritual energy vortex deep in the night sky was torn apart, before the starry and moonlit night sky was revealed. At this moment, if one were to look into the depths of the spiritual energy vortex, they would surely see the phantom of a giant whale, growing bigger and bigger. Ho! An increasingly long cry reverberated through the sky as the patterns on the blood-red willow leaf began to flicker. Yuziu was refining the blood-red willow leaf, using his vast spiritual energy. However, this was only the beginning. System, use evolution points to upgrade the willow leaf flying knife. Ding, please confirm, do you want to consume 10 million evolution points to upgrade the willow leaf flying knife? Confirm. Just as Yuziu gave the confirmation, he felt a tremor through his body and even his soul. Immediately after, Yuziu felt as if his soul was being torn apart as an inexplicably sharp aura surged from the depths of Yuziu's soul. This was sharpness, the true sharpness, almost like a fundamental force akin to principles, the Tao, or even the quintessence. For some reason, an understanding arose in Yuziu's heart. Now, if one were to look at Yuziu's status screen, they would witness the description of the willow leaf flying knife changing. Looking closely at the description, Yuziu could not help but squint his eyes. Even the description was radiating an inexplicably sharp aura. This was the Tier 5 willow leaf flying knife, no, more accurately, it should be called, heaven-slashing flying blade. Narrowing his eyes slightly, Yuziu finally read through the description. Heaven-slashing flying blade, somehow managed to raise a trace of principle, even if it's just a trace. The sharpness of the flying blade has increased from several to dozens of times. If it's cultivated to the extreme, fully comprehended the Tao of sharpness, ordinary beings wouldn't stand a chance. Even hegemons, Tier 7s, and Eternal Realm experts, Tier 8, would be ripped by its sharpness. Tao of sharpness, comprehension 1%. Slowly withdrawing his gaze, Yuziu looked at the refined willow leaves within his body once more. At this moment, there were not just 3, but 4, and including the blood-red willow leaf being refined in the spiritual energy vortex, there were a total of 5 willow leaves carrying Yuziu's understanding of the Tao of sharpness. It was this sharpness that could tear through everything, that could not be stopped by anyone. Now, it could only cut through tangible things. However, if Yuziu's understanding of the Tao of sharpness deepened, he could even cut through intangible things like space, time, and causality. However, such sharpness was beyond the reach of even Tier 5 and Tier 6 transcendence. Currently, Yuziu's pursuit leaned more towards cutting through reality, cutting through everything solid like a piece of paper. Wuxia estimated that the comprehension of the Tao of sharpness might have a critical threshold at 50%. He believed that if his comprehension reaches 50%, he would almost be able to sever the intangible. As these thoughts flashed in his mind, a wry smile appeared on his face. He had not expected his understanding of the Tao of sharpness to be only at 1%. Oh well, 1% is already quite good enough. Wuxia understood that the so-called Tao or principles were extremely profound, and they were merely auxiliary means for him at the moment. Simply put, the deeper his understanding of the Tao of sharpness, the sharper his flying willow leaf blades would be. If he comprehended the Tao of fire, then his flying willow leaf blades would be extremely hot and ignite everything around it. If he comprehended the Tao of extreme ice, then his flying willow leaf blades would be extremely cold and freeze everything around it. It was not just a simple addition of elemental properties, it was the application of principles that transcended the elements. For example, if he comprehended the Tao of fire, what Wuxia might shoot out would not be just a blade, but a star in the shape of a blade. Ahem, Wuxia forced a cough, feeling that he was letting his imagination run wild. Understanding the Tao of sharpness is already a huge coincidence, yet here I am, was pondering about other Taos. Too much is as bad as too little, and being greedy is even worse. I might have acquired the Tao of sharpness, but I've no idea how to improve my comprehension. So, stop daydreaming for now. Shaking his head helplessly, Wuxia pushed down the various thoughts rising in his mind. At this moment, it's more important for me to summarize and organize things. Firstly, I must integrate other abilities, and secondly, I must thoroughly study this Tao of sharpness. Just then, as if he had thought of something, Wuxia's gaze shifted to Nine Tails in the distance. As he expected, Nine Tails' attribute panel had an additional line of clear text. Tao of Sealing, Comprehension 0, 5%, even less than mine, huh? It was already within his expectations that Nine Tails would have touched upon a Tao already, but he had not expected that she had only comprehended 0. 5%. TSK, clicking his tongue, Wuxia also felt somewhat helpless. I guess Taos and principles are indeed extraordinarily profound. As a matter of fact, the only reason Wuxia could now see Nine Tails' comprehension of the Tao of Sealing was likely because he had touched upon a Tao himself. There were countless Taos or principles, it was impossible to comprehend every single one. Actually, some beings, with exceptional talent, might master multiple Taos, while others might focus on a single Tao. There was no gap between these two approaches. What mattered was who had a deeper understanding and more skillful application of their Tao. Having touched upon the Tao of sharpness, Wuxia could now see the Taos comprehended by others. This was also the most terrifying aspect of Wuxia's system. In a sense, it would grow alongside Wuxia. Taking a long, deep breath, Wuxia stopped thinking about it. The so-called Taos or principles were higher-level forces. With his talent and foundation, he would grasp them sooner or later, so he believed that there was no need to be overly astonished, and it was more important now to settle and consolidate. In the past few days, Wuxia had devoured the blood and flesh of countless carcasses and a massive amount of spiritual energy. He felt now that his body was about to explode. Even with his current strength, he found it hard to bear. If he did not consolidate in time, he might suffer from sequelae in the future. Thinking of this, Wuxia gave some instruction to Nine Tails and then focused his mind on his main body. Hush, a gentle night breeze swept across the continent. The willow branches and leaves of Wuxia's treetop swayed lightly in the night wind. However, at that moment, for some reason, many mutant beasts felt the air lighten up. Slowly raising their heads, they looked at the towering tree standing like a skyscraper. Even the foreign mutant beasts understood that the divine tree had fallen asleep. Meanwhile, in a mysterious hall in America. Who can resist that tree monster? At the drop of this question, the entire hall could not help but fall silent, completely silent. At this moment, everyone was looking at a screen of light hovering in the air. Projected on the screen was a somewhat blurry image of a towering tree, blocking out the sky and the sun. On this towering tree, there happened to a white tiger with wings, occasionally roaring. There was also a fox with several tails behind it, lying quietly. It happened to be surrounded by flames, giving the impression as if it had just walked out from a sea of flames. However, what made the pupils of many in the hall contract was that purple creature resembling a giant dragon. No, more accurately, it was a giant dragon, and a renowned member of the dragon clan, a lightning dragon. It even has a lightning dragon as one of his subordinates. With a bitter smile, a human with dark complexion, seemingly merged with the darkness, had his eyes grow dim. Sigh, what is a dragon compared to that winged white tiger? That is Cheongchi. A notoriously vicious fiend, so ferocious that even dragons dare not provoke it. Listening to this, many figures could not help but have their eyes twitch. However, after a moment, as if recalling something, a girl with silver blonde hair suddenly stepped forward and consoled everyone. It shouldn't be a pureblood. If it is a true Cheongchi, the tree monster would never be able to subdue it. You're right. After a moment of silence, a prodigy from China also agreed. Hiya, exhaling a deep breath, the person seated in the highest seat, sensing the oppressive atmosphere, stood up and spoke, all right, let's not let this tree monster ruin our mood. Let's continue our meeting. After saying this, the figure seemed to remember something and added with some concern, of course, I suggest we include the tree monster in our discussions as well. That entity is too terrifying now. If we don't take precautions, it could pose a huge problem. Hearing this, the entire hall fell into a deathly silence. Even those as strong as them felt somewhat powerless when looking at the tree monster on the screen. As a matter of fact, the people here were prodigies and high-level officials from various human nations, and even the entire continent. They had gathered to discuss the future direction of humanity. It could be said that the humans gathered here were peak figures, renowned in their respective countries. Not to mention the famous Empress, Ling Er, just the presence of one of 3 superhumans in the entire world, the master of magnetism, Yule was enough to tell the pivotal importance of every individual present here. There are 18 humans in Tier 4, and there may be more hidden natural disaster classes as well. Murmuring to herself, a girl with flame-like hair had a flicker in her eyes. This girl was wearing a gorgeous crown and a red veil. She was barefoot and exuded an indescribable elegance. Especially striking were her earrings, each intricately detailed and resembled a flood dragon and a snake, adding a touch of bewitching charm. This was the Empress, Ling Er, the first human to break through to Tier 3 and currently the most publicly renowned prodigy of China. Hiya, with a soft sigh, Ling Er looked down, gently stroking a small, jade-like white elephant in her arms. The elephant was not that big, only the size of a domestic cat. Yet, every strong person present, upon seeing the elephant, revealed expressions of shock, because this little white elephant was a natural disaster-class creature. Feeling a mix of emotions, many geniuses from other continents finally understood why this seemingly gentle woman was revered as the Empress. Even her pet is a natural disaster class, no wonder she commands such awe. However, at this moment, as if sensing something, Ling Er's gaze shifted to a nearby spot, where 2 girls stood side by side. One woman had a thin veil over her face and eyes with flames burning inside them. She had a mysterious aura around her. The other woman was cloaked in black, looking like a shadow. Upon closer inspection, the space around this cloaked woman seemed to ripple irregularly like water. This was Aisha, Wuxia's first apostle, and the saintess of the Alliance of South Asian Nations Buddhist Church. She had also consumed an elemental fruit. With her talent, reaching Tier 4 would have been difficult, but the terrifying power of the elemental fruit made her an elemental. So, stepping into Tier 4 was a matter of course. Next to her was Wuxia's third apostle, Owl, also known as one of the most famous prodigies of China, once on par with Ling Er, possessing spatial innate talent. Even if she was now at the peak of Tier 3, Ling Er could not underestimate her. The power of space was unlike any other. Crossing realms to fight was not just talk. Moreover, even if she couldn't win, she could definitely escape. At this moment, as their eyes met, Aisha and Ling Er exchanged subtle nods before turning their attention back to the hall. This time, our human geniuses gather to primarily discuss the future direction of the human race. Secondly, we need to discuss how to deal with the mutant beasts that have become a significant force. And finally, that tree monster, sitting on the highest seat, a young man wearing a steel helmet and a red cape scrutinized the attendees for a moment before speaking plainly. The future of the human race, murmuring to herself, Saintess Ilia of the Western European Church suddenly stood up and stated bluntly, so far, apart from humans struggling to survive in Australia, the barbarian tribes rampaging in Africa, and the mysterious Antarctica, the other continents are still under our human control. Under human control, with a sneer, the dark-complexioned man whose figure appeared to be blended into the shadows, retorted disdainfully, "You overestimate the human race." As he spoke, this black man inadvertently glanced at Princess He Ling Er sitting on the right, then quickly added, "I've heard that in Asia, humans are struggling to breathe under the pressure of mutant beasts." Bang! Suddenly, a loud crash reverberated in the hall as the armrest shattered into pieces. Looking towards the sources, it was one of the Chinese prodigy, his face full of rage. However, before he could speak, he suddenly felt a cold gaze on him. "Sister Ling Er," he seemed to want to explain, but feeling the increasingly cold gaze, this prodigy could not help but shiver and quickly sat down. "Huh, what? Did I say something wrong?" Seeing the Chinese prodigy sit down obediently again, the laughter of the black man grew even more complacent. However, the next moment, his body tensed up. Even when he had reached Tier 4, he could smell a scent named death at this moment. Gulp, subconsciously gulping, the black man noticed a pair of eyes looking at him as if he were a dead man. The eyes were completely ice-cold, sending chills straight to the bone. "No wonder she's so legendary," thinking to himself, "the master of magnetism, you'll cast a suspicious glance at He Ling Er. She made the arrogant Alan like this with just a glare. I have to admit, she is indeed terrifying. However, this is not the time for internal strife. Alan, stand down." A shout infused with spiritual energy appropriately pulled Alan out of his mental shock. "Yes, boss," responding quickly, the Alan also cast a lingering glance at the barefooted girl, gently stroking a jade elephant on the right side of the hall. "Damn, she really is a monster." Suppressing the anger in his heart, the Alan looked at Ling Er with an undisguised hint of greed in his eyes. Everybody loved beauty, especially a peerless beauty like Ling Er. Among the 10 men present, at least 8 or 9 harbored fantasies about Ling Er, except most concealed it well. There were some, like Alan, who did not hide it. "I already slapped the last one to death, yet there is another one," sneering in her heart, Ling Er slowly lowered her head, suppressing the surge of killing intent rising within her. She truly detested such looks from the bottom of her heart. She found it insulting to be looked upon like this. Without hesitation, Ling Er, with her head bowed, silently let her spiritual energy surge. At this moment, if one were to look into Ling Er's sleeve, they would surely see a jade-like willow leaf beginning to slowly burn. At the moment this willow leaf began to burn, far away in Africa. Boom, with a jolt in his heart, Yuziyu, who had been meditating, suddenly opened his eyes. "Ling Er is calling me." Muttering softly to himself, a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. If my guess was correct, the humans are likely holding a meeting. Chuckling in his heart, Yuziyu cast a glance at Nine Tails. Nine Tails understood his meaning with just one look. Yip, with a fox's howl, the mutant beasts around Yuziyu began to move like a tide, heading towards the 9 realms of heaven. Fearsome tremors shook the ground as countless mutant beasts chose to retreat under Nine Tails' call. Notably, Wuxia's 9 realms of heaven had expanded further with abundant resources. Take Pocket of Space and Earth for example, the two most common elements, had reached the size of 70,000 meters in radius. Spanning 70,000 meters in all directions, their area was no smaller than an average human city. However, relative to human cities, Wuxia's spaces resembled more like worlds. For instance, the Pocket of Earth stretched endlessly, with vast stretches of land and flourishing flora and fauna. The rich earth element here had turned the entire Pocket of Earth into a vast continent with mountains, rivers, and everything in between. What was even more fantastical was deep within the Pocket of Earth, where numerous Tier 2 and Tier 3 spirit herbs and flowers thrived. In contrast, the Pocket of Fire appeared as an endless desert with no visible end. The dense fire element intersected with the sky, forming an eternal sun that never extinguished. The more concentrated the fire element, the hotter the sun burned. However, the desert and Pocket of Fire sloped gently upwards. And at the highest point of this slope grew countless fire-attribute spirit herbs and flowers. Each space pocket was evolving towards becoming a world of its own. Wuxia did not interfere with their forms, nor did he find it wise to interfere. Relatively speaking, he believed that allowing them to develop freely was the best choice. When these space pockets grew to a radius of 100,000 meters, Wuxia could truly introduce life forms to thrive and reproduce. At that point, they would be akin to small worlds. By then, with the 9 space pockets supporting him, Wuxia's strength would qualitatively advance. Thinking of this, a hint of anticipation flickered in Wuxia's eyes. However, before that, I need to make a trip to America. As a continent under human control, I believe its resources are truly abundant. Just then, a voice suddenly sounded in Wuxia's ear, breaking him from his contemplation. "Master, all the mutant beasts have returned." Hearing this, Wuxia nodded his acknowledgement. "Let's go then." As he spoke, Wuxia's main body began to shrink continuously until it was just over 10 meters tall. The space seemed unable to withstand Wuxia's power and instantly shattered. Immediately after, a terrifying suction force engulfed Wuxia's main body. However, at this moment, if one were to pay attention to his current appearance, they would notice that even though he had shrunk to this size, there were still 9 different colored vortexes spinning around his body. It was not something he was doing deliberately. Rather, as Wuxia's 9 space pockets grew stronger, he found it difficult to conceal them. Thus, they manifested in this form, unintentionally exuding a hint of his power into the world. Besides, it made Wuxia look mysterious. No wonder, in the legends, as one grows stronger, the more mystical they appear. It seems, it's not that they intend to show off, but after becoming powerful to a certain extent, their energy inadvertently overflows. With a smile in his heart, Wuxia soared into the distance using the cosmic route. At this moment, in the Sky Haven of America. Since its establishment, this city of steel, known as Ever Floating, had the most magnificent hull. The meeting was drawing to a close. Now, one after another, human prodigies from various continents began discussing the final agenda. However, when the master of magnetism, Yule presented this topic, many humans chose to remain silent. Is no one going to speak? Yule's bitter voice echoed, feeling helpless. In fact, the pressure brought by the tree monster was too immense. Consequently, the prodigies present were at a loss for words. Hundreds of people were sitting in the hall, each one a prodigy. Among them over a dozen were Tier 4 superhumans, the rest of them were mostly Tier 3s. They were truly the elites of the human race. However, faced with the final proposal from Yule, none could step forward, and none dared to do so. Since the advent of the era of transcendence, the tree monster has already gained a fearsome reputation. And every spiritual energy tide, it grew at a speed far surpassing that of the humans. Even today, let alone other humans, even among the prodigies present, few knew to what extent he had grown. Faced with such an unfathomable monster, none dared to express their opinion. Hiya, a sigh escaped Yule. He turned his gaze to Empress, Ling Er, asking in a straightforward manner, the Chinese should understand the tree monster best. I believe you should be able to offer some good insights. Insights. An amused smile played on Ling Er's lips. Asking her for advice on how to deal with Master was pointless. But after a moment's thought, she realized her relationship with Master might have been noticed by the guy lurking in the depths of China. With a gentle smile, Ling Er stood up and replied, the tree monster is unbeatable. Listening to Ling Er's decisive voice, the humans present fell into a slight silence. It was as they had expected. However, at that moment, an unfriendly voice suddenly interrupted, I say, aren't you overestimating the threat of that tree monster a bit too much? It's just a freaking tree. I don't believe that with our power, we can't destroy it. The speaker was none other than Alan, the black man. As a renowned genius of America, Alan was always known for his arrogance. His current display seemed to fit most people's perceptions of him. Nevertheless, arrogance aside, one still needed to have a good head on their shoulders. Hiya, another sigh escaped in the hall as a figure stood up. It was a woman with a long sword hanging by her waist. This time, it was the British's King of Knights. Her reputation was second only to the Master of Magnetism and the Empress. Now, as she stood up slowly, she interrupted Alan and stated with pursed lips, I agree with the Empress. It's unbeatable. We shouldn't sacrifice innocent lives for a supposed victory, especially considering the terror of that tree monster. We might not even see the hope of victory. Can't even see hope anymore. A light sigh, filled with helplessness, escaped the Master of Magnetism, Yule. As the strongest superhuman of humanity, he understood the terror of the tree monster. That kind of terror was far beyond the imagination of the experts seated here. Perhaps others could not perceive it, but as the Master of Magnetism, how could he not sense the true terror of the tree monster? Everyone and everything had their own magnetic fields. The stronger one was, the stronger were their magnetic fields. In other words, magnetic fields would never lie. Long ago, Yule had already sensed some anomalies with the tree monster. While its magnetic field was incredibly restrained thanks to its efforts, an oppressive pressure remained lurking deep within that restrained magnetic field. Perhaps it has long stepped into a more terrifying realm. Anguished and frustrated, Yule didn't know what to say. Just then, crack, suddenly, as if a thunderclap shook his mind, Yule sitting in the seat floating in the air at the center of the hall, suddenly had a drastic change in his expression. Faintly, sweat could be seen trickling down his forehead. His breathing became rapid and veins bulged on his clenched fists. At this moment, sensing Yule's anomaly, the gazes of those present turned towards him. It's nothing, let's continue. Waving his hand, Yule managed to control his expression well, pretending as if nothing had happened. However, unknown to many, in a corner of Skyhaven, within a dark deep alley, crack. Space suddenly shattered like glass, before a trace of purple emerged from the cracked space. Bit by bit, countless purple rootlets emerged from the rift in space, intertwining continuously into a slender figure. Yet, as this figure appeared out of thin air, as if noticing something, it glanced thoughtfully towards the center of the city. So they've spotted me. It seems humans really can't be underestimated. Saying this, Wuxia slowly lifted his footsteps. Tap, 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 each step echoed in the deep alley. Before long, darkness dispelled and a city paved with steel and iron, glittering with greenish-black hue, entered Wuxia's sight. The sky was filled with strange yellow, green lights, just like the red lights of the bygone era. The ground was paved with bluish-black tiles, and buildings built from pure iron and steel rising from the ground. And at their tips were tooth-like protrusions. At a closer look, these sharp protrusions were flickering with electric arcs. Except, it was not electric currents but the manifestation of an extremely strong magnetic field. This is the city of steel, huh? What a terrifying fortress of war. As Yu made a simple evaluation, a voice rang in his ear, "Sir, what brings you here?" "Sir." A light chuckle escaped Yu before he jokingly asked, "Don't you recognize me?" At the drop of these words, the air suddenly became completely quiet, as if trying to calm itself. However, in a moment, zzz, countless electric arcs interweaved in the air, creating a phantom shortly afterward. It was a human, wearing a steel helmet and draped in a red cape. It was the master of magnetism, the most terrifying existence in America, and also the master of this city. Now, leveraging the magnetic field pervading the entire city, he effortlessly executed a projection-like trick. "You shouldn't have come here." A somewhat hoarse voice emanated from Yule, his face cold and grave. On closer inspection, one could even see a hint of fear deep in his eyes. If the people of America knew about this, it would surely cause a huge stir, but he could not do anything about it. The more powerful one became, the more one understood the true terror of the tree monster. Now, in such close contact, Yule was realizing just how terrifying this legendary tree monster truly was. Even if Yu was suppressing his presence to his utmost, he was still unconsciously emanating an oppressive aura, nearly suffocating those nearby. Yet, this was not even the terrifying part. More terrifying was the keen perception of Yule, who had sensed a towering giant tree quietly appearing in the void space in the backside of the city. Surrounding it were 9 swirling vortices of different colors, silently rotating. Its canopy so vast that it could cover several cities of steel, and its trunk so thick that it could support an entire city. Struggling to contain his trembling heart, Yule knew trouble was brewing. And this was no ordinary trouble. The greatest crisis in human history was silently descending. If Skyhaven, along with all the superhumans here, were to be wiped out, Yule could clearly imagine the chaos the entire human race would plunge into. Hiya, heaving a long, deep breath, Yule repeatedly suppressed his inner turmoil. However, no matter how he suppressed it, looking at this slender and somewhat handsome figure made him feel uneasy. A faint chill rose from his feet, freezing both his body and mind. "What exactly are you trying to do?" Yule questioned once again with his face tensing up. One could even see sweat appearing on his forehead. "Do you think a mere projection has the right to converse with me?" A playful voice echoed in the air. And just as Yu's words fell, the surrounding magnetic field, seemed affected, started violently shaking. Right at that very moment. In the center of Skyhaven, the master of magnetism, seated high up in the hall, suddenly grunted, his face turning pale. "It actually managed to injure me even at such a distance." Yule looked towards the sky with an indescribable horror. Right at this moment. "What's wrong? What happened? I feel like your condition is not good." Amidst exclamations, countless people in the hall looked up at the figure seated high above. For some reason, Yule's aura suddenly seemed weakened, as if injured. However, before Yule could say anything, the King of Knights, who had been sitting quietly in her seat, slowly rose. "The sword in my hand tells me that true terror has arrived. Our master is also reminding me." In response, the saint and saintess from the Vatican also stood up, their faces grave. Tap, 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 leisure steps echoed through the streets of Skyhaven. Yu took the rare time to appreciate the urban beauty unlike anything found in nature. Built entirely from steel, the city exuded a beauty unique to metal. And coupled with its futuristic appearance, Yu could not help but curl his lips into a smile. I have to admit, humans are exceptionally gifted in creation. Admiring the view, Yu's psychic energy gradually enveloped the entire city. In just a few breaths, a slowly rotating 3D model of the entire city appeared in Yu's mind. There are 7 places with strong energy fluctuations, and another 13 with subtle ones. There are countless spirit stone mines, including many with the light attribute that I desire. Murmuring to himself, Wuxia gained a rough understanding of the city's layout and resource distribution. Although the current him had nothing to fear, he still believed that a necessary vigilance was still essential. Moreover, as a Tier 5 transcendent with a powerful soul, Wuxia was likely more proficient in using psychic energy than those with psychic innate talent. In an instant, he not only covered the entire Sky City but also uncovered the places exuding formidable auras. It seems they all know of my arrival. With these words, Wuxia lifted his footsteps and headed towards the city center. At the same time, in the city center, after a brief explanation of the situation, the entire hall fell into a solemn atmosphere, with some superhumans wearing expressions of disbelief and incredulity. Some even began to boast. It's just a demonic tree. Since he dares to come here, I'll make it so that he doesn't return alive. Yes, since he is here alone, let's show him the power of our human race. Humph, this clown seems to have forgotten that we humans already dominate the food chain. Furious and boastful roars filled the hall, with many superhuman spiritual energy surging. Rumble, 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 and with the rise of this terrifying spiritual energy pressure, the entire hall began to tremble. Visible to the naked eye, one spiritual energy storm after another erupted. However, looking at these many enraged superhumans, powerful superhumans including the Master of Magnetism, the King of Knights, and even the Saint and Saintess of the Vatican, had their faces turned ugly. Being too weak was a kind of bless. As for these truly powerful superhumans, this whole experience was true agony. Tap, 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 the resounding footsteps, despite coming from afar, for the powerful figures like the Master of Magnetism, were like someone was stepping on their chests hard. A great sense of terror filled their mind and body. Tap, suddenly, a footstep, heavier and louder than before, echoed, before the entire sky half started shaking, as if someone had stepped on the entire city. However, before many of the superhumans could react, puff. A large mouthful of blood mixed with internal organs spurted out of the Master of Magnetism, Yule's mouth. What's wrong? You! Exclamations rang out one after another, with countless superhumans' faces changing slightly. Several Americans rushed to support him. But right then, Yule waved them away, grabbed onto the throne, gasping heavily, before speaking, that tree monster knows that I'm connected to the entire city. Just now, it used the entire city to severely injure me. What? The King of Knights suddenly exclaimed, her face visibly pale. It injured the Master of Magnetism using the city. Are you kidding me? It's akin to using the power of potential to overwhelm a Tier 4. Can someone at the same tier really achieve such a feat? The King of Knights personally believed that despite her formidable power of potential, it was unlikely to materialize and inflict severe damage on someone as powerful as the Master of Magnetism, or even a Tier 3. However, now, much to her surprise, there actually existed someone who, by using solely their power of potential, managed to severely injure the Master of Magnetism, whose strength was likely not inferior to her. Damn it! Sighing in her heart, the King of Knights knew that they were in a precarious situation. At this moment, the Master of Magnetism did not need to explain how terrifying that tree monster was. Tap, tap, with each light step, a near-tangible pressure came down on everyone from the horizon. Crack, crack, the hall seemed unable to withstand the pressure and slowly began to crack. Even the pillars supporting the hall were creaking as cracks spread over them. Avalon, with a tender shout, a knight with blonde hair, petite like a lowly, drew her long sword from her waist with one hand. Immediately after, a thin but transparent blue light screen, shaped like an inverted bowl, suddenly appeared with a thunderous clap, expanding at a terrifying speed. However, right then, another deafening crash shook the hall as something broke through the light, shattering the hall and kicking up a cloud of dust. Accompanying this was a beam of sunlight descending from the sky, piercing through layers of clouds and shining on everyone's faces. From a distance, it looked as if the air was filled with golden dust. It was an exceptionally dazzling sight. However, no one was admiring this scenery at the moment, because within the dust, a slender silhouette slowly emerged. A human. A voice filled with disbelief and sharpness echoed through the broken hall. No, that demonic tree can weave human-like bodies from its roots. Don't be deceived by it. The sudden reminder from a Chinese prodigy made the elites of the human race break into cold sweat. Indeed, if anyone present here understood the tree monster best, it would be China. After all, this tree monster originated from there. It was like dealing with a neighbor. Realizing who had intruded upon their meeting, the Chinese prodigies could not help but feel bitter. Gritting their teeth, they tightened their grip on their long swords once again. However, at that moment, a sudden roar echoed through the hall, "Tree monster, huh? Let me see for myself if you're as terrifying as the rumors." With these words, a burly young man stomped the ground, and with a thunderous roar, shot forward like a cannonball. And just as he shot forward, a cold chill surged from him as a layer of ice armor covered him and a massive ice spear, measuring 3 meters long, manifested in his right hand. This was the specialty of the Icelanders. The ice armor enhanced their defense significantly, while the ice spear maximized their offensive capabilities. Utilizing the ice element to its utmost, their defense and offense was perfectly balanced. And this was also the reason a small island nation like Iceland managed to produce natural disaster class Tier 4 superhumans. Amidst the dust and smoke, a violent shout erupted, "Die!" Immediately after, a fearsome chill spread through the surroundings, seemingly freezing the air. Visible to the naked eye, countless ice flakes appeared in the air, covering an area of several hundred meters. However, amidst the majestic display of power by this Icelandic warrior, a disdainful chuckle echoed within the dust and smoke. "Humans today truly know no bounds." Just as these words rang in the air, squillish, a crisp sound echoed as clear as thunder in the ears of many human warriors. Raising their gazes, they saw a figure clad in ice armor and holding a long spear hanging in the air. What? How is this possible? One exclamation followed another as numerous superhumans in the hall noticed the blood seeping from the back of Icelandic warrior like plum blossoms in bloom. Even more astonishing was the fact that this Icelandic warrior was slowly petrifying. Bit by bit, his body was solidifying, transforming into wood. From a distance, he looked like a sculpture made of wood, silently suspended in midair. And at that moment, whoosh, a breeze blew past, dispersing the light mist and revealing something like branches shooting out from its depths, directly towards the chest of the Icelandic warrior. My assimilation ability turns out to not be that weak. Wuxia secretly admired himself, feeling quite satisfied with the current power of his lignification. This lignification was akin to the Snake Queen's petrification. When Wuxia ascended to Tier 4, he awakened this ability. Wuxia rarely used it, but today's trial proved its terrifying effectiveness. At least, looking at the dumbfounded horror on the faces of many humans from afar, Wuxia was more than satisfied. The necessary intimidation has been established. Next, however, before Wuxia could continue. "Stop, hurry, save him." Roars echoed one after another as several figures rushed toward the Icelandic warrior. Leading the charge was none other than the King of Knights, wielding a long sword, swoosh. Suddenly, a cold light flashed, a silver-white sword light cutting across Wuxia's cheek. What a terrifying speed! Murmuring, Wuxia flicked 2 fingers together, flicking the sword that was just inches away, sending a terrifying tremor through the sword. "Damn you!" The King of Knights shouted as her spiritual energy surged and she tightened her grip on the trembling sword in her hand once more. Right at that very moment, a dazzling bright light filled Wuxia's vision, while countless swords soared into the air, filling the surroundings. "You freaking tree monster," shouted Yule, the master of magnetism, from a distance, gritting through his injuries and raising his hand towards Yuziyu. Swish, 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 immediately afterwards, countless swords cut through the air and rained down on Yuziyu like meteors. Thunderous explosions shook the city of metal with each sword's descent, as if they were not swords but missiles raining down. At this moment, the entire city kept shaking as an endless cacophony of explosions drowned Yuziyu. Yet, this was only the beginning. In the air, the saint and saintess of the Vatican were hovering, spreading their wings of light. "Evil, begone." The saint and saintess shot a glance at each other before the wings of light behind them started trembling, with light drawing towards them. The next moment, with a thunderous roar, a dazzling beam tore through the sky, shooting towards Yuziyu. Impressive. Yuziyu gave a short praise, somewhat satisfied with these guys' attacks. Whether it was pre-planned or just a tacit understanding, their coordinated assaults had managed to immediately block his movements. What left him most astounded was that their attacks were carried out in one go, making it difficult for Yuziyu's body, which was woven from roots, to parry them. Unfortunately for them, this body was ultimately just a puppet. Yuziyu's true form was that of a tree, a towering divine tree that seemed to be bridging heaven and earth. Smirking, Yuziyu manipulated this physical form and lightly tapped on the ground, murmuring, "Advent of the tree world." With a surge of Yuziyu's spiritual energy, thunderous rumbles reverberated across the city, shaking the entire city. The streets, forged from steel, began to crack incessantly. Even the skyscrapers started cracking apart. Shortly afterwards, tentacle-like roots grew out of the cracks, spreading through the city. In just a few breaths, countless lush green trees sprang up from the ground, turning the entire city into a lush forest. The sight of trees growing out of buildings, tearing through the steel structures, with branches dangling in between the buildings and winding roots spreading across the ground, looked like a scene straight from Doomsday. It shook countless humans to their core. Suddenly, with thunderous rumbles, a root, as thick as a water bucket, spread through the entire street, ripping through it and revealing a crack more than 10 meters wide. Within that crack, a superhuman, completely pale, happened to be standing with his hands crossed above his head, panting heavily. He was nearly crushed to death by the roots moments ago. However, compared to this guy's plight, the others weren't faring any better either. At the outbreak of Yuziyu's advent of the tree world, the entire city plunged into a real apocalypse. Branches and roots ran rampant, transforming into snakes, hissing endlessly, and at times into dragons, roaring with their necks extended. In this frenzy, not only did they disperse the various attacks launched by the superhumans, but they also completely suppressed them. Some of the superhumans were even pierced through by the roots. "You bastard, I'll kill you. You demon. Demon." The superhumans kept shouting at Yuziyu in anger again and again. They felt frustrated and furious at their inability to approach Yuziyu even though it wasn't Yuziyu's true body, but a body woven from rootlets. Yuziyu's figure at the end of the street was completely surrounded by a giant net of green roots. "If this is all you got, then the game ends here," Yuziyu's calm voice echoed through the city. Yuziyu no longer had the mood to play. He did not particularly enjoy playing with humans because as a former human himself, he deeply understood not to underestimate them, in case things went wrong. Therefore, at first sight, he turned the entire steel city into a forest and took control of it. With everything under control, a green flood dragon-like root lifted Yuziyu's body slowly, as he cast a cold and mocking gaze at the superhumans below. Meanwhile, just beneath Skyhaven, on the ground, a girl in a white dress slowly approached. What was surprising was that Yuziyu had failed to notice her approach. Her expression was indifferent, almost devoid of emotion. Her eyes, hollow and tinged with confusion. Human. Race, murmuring to herself, a hint of nostalgia flickered deep within the girl's eyes. She, too, was once human, but now. Raising her hand in a daze and gazing at the arm that had already begun to slowly disappear, with only faint traces remaining, the girl's face contorted with indescribable bitterness. A chosen being, destined for involuntary suffering. Thinking this, the girl lifted her foot and walked towards the city that loomed above her head. Tap, just as her foot stepped in the air, the entire sky shook and cracks appeared in space, resembling a shattered mirror. Simultaneously, the girl's expression grew increasingly indifferent, her eyes becoming more hollow. It was as if her consciousness was fading away. She was Snow. The last time the Flood Dragon King destroyed various human cities, she had made a brief appearance. However, upon sensing Yu's aura, she chose not to intervene. After all, it was not time. Every single time humans suffered horrendous casualties, whether by coincidence, fate, or some cosmic design, she would appear out of nowhere, either observing silently or staring. Her presence seemed like a disaster. Wherever she went, devastation followed. She remembered vividly, 3 years ago when she truly awakened, the Sea Clan had invaded various continents, causing billions of human casualties. Later, she passed through a human city plagued by a rat plague, where millions of people perished. And, she ventured into the desert, where a sandstorm engulfed several human tribes. One of her friends had once declared, "She is the embodiment of disaster, the true source of calamity." No matter where she went, no matter where she fled, disaster seemed to spread. And now, she had arrived. She came to the American continent, the stronghold of human power. She did not want to come here, fearing that her presence would again unleash unprecedented catastrophe. However, she had no control over herself. Walking with light steps, she crossed oceans and continents and finally arrived beneath this floating city. Faintly, something seemed to be calling her. Bitterly smiling, Snow slowly walked towards Skyhaven. She had already sensed it, the terrifying aura. "It's that tree monster," murmuring to herself, realization dawned upon Snow. "I guess the tree monster is attacking the humans." Just then, boom. A thunderous clap rang in Snow's mind, shaking it horribly before an indescribably terrifying pressure surged from the depths of her soul. "Remember, you are not the embodiment of disaster, you exist to protect," a majestic voice, seemingly coming from ancient times, echoed in Snow's mind, causing her brain to vibrate even more fiercely. Simultaneously, Snow's mind domain unexpectedly began to expand at this moment, steadily increasing. 41%. 42%. Bit by bit. Little by little. Each increase brought about a terrifying qualitative change in her brain. At the same time, the once clear sky darkened. Rumble, 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 suddenly, amidst flashes of lightning and rolling thunder, a massive vortex of dark clouds was formed in the sky. However, what was even more horrifying was the tremendous pressure that shot straight into the sky. However, ordinary people could not perceive this pressure, because the moment it soared into the sky suddenly shattered like a mirror, while that slender figure silently arrived on the backside of the world, a place filled with desolation and emptiness. Meanwhile, deep in the void space, a colossal tree, so vast that it could be considered boundless, silently hovered. Around it, 9 enormous vortexes spun continuously. With each rotation, ripples of spiritual energy spread through the void space, creating storms. However, compared to the magnificent phenomena around it, the giant tree itself was far more spectacular. Its trunk was so tall that it seemed to be piercing through heaven, with prismatic spiritual energy glow flowing around it. Its glowing branches, swaying in the stormy void space, resembled mystical divine chains. And as for the lower part of its body, a seemingly endless green dragon was coiled beneath the tree, with dragon roars echoing every now and then. It appeared to be lying dormant yet half awake. Around this green dragon, one could hear endless roars and hissing, with each root having taken all sorts of mutant beasts. There were purple-colored titanoboas, whose bodies kept extending with each roar. There were also hissing pitch-black creatures, resembling flood dragons, with ice-cold dragon eyes. This was Yu Ziyu's current form that no human had ever laid eyes upon, and also the terrifying form that had truly taken root in void space. His 81 secondary roots, using the cosmic roots as a medium, continuously extracted energy from the void space. While his primary root, the green dragon, like its appearance, was truly in deep slumber. However, Yu Ziyu believed that when it opened its eyes, it would signify his strength reaching an extreme peak. However, now, something unbelievable, something shocking had happened. Breaking through space, a figure clad in a gently fluttering white muslin dress arrived deep within the void space, calmly floating not far from Yu Ziyu. Her features were somewhat blurred, not easy to discern. Long, flowing hair cascaded elegantly, seemingly imbued with an inexplicable power, emitting a faint sheen. No, more accurately, this woman's entire body exuded a shimmering glow that even Yu Ziyu found difficult to comprehend. "Who are you?" Voicing his doubt and suspicion, Yu Ziyu's awareness was fully drawn back from Skyhaven to his true form. However, his query received no response, apart from the slender figure slowly raising her hand. "I am here to protect," Yu Ziyu vaguely heard a faint whisper. But the next moment, boom, a thunderous explosion shook the entire void space. The void space began collapsing, as if unable to withstand the force of a single palm from that slender figure. Amidst all this, a palm imprint flew out of the slender figure's hand, growing bigger and bigger as it flew towards Yu Ziyu's true form that was thousands or even tens of thousands of meters away. In a flash, Yu Ziyu lightly shouted as a crystalline brilliance covered Yu Ziyu's entire body, divine technique, crystallization. Asterisk bomb. With a deafening clap, the palm imprint fell upon Yu Ziyu's true body, even shaking it slightly. If one were to look closely at Yu Ziyu now, they would discover a 3-inch deep enormous palm imprint on his tree body. It was just 3 inches deep. Compared to Yu Ziyu's formidable physique, it was truly insignificant. This? Seemingly shocked, that distant figure once again raised their palm. Smack, another fearsome smack descended towards Yu Ziyu, carrying with it an endless void storm. However, in an instant, hiss, sudden hisses erupted as a giant purple python, transformed from one of Yu Ziyu's roots, hisses towards the sky. Next, it opened its gaping maws, unleashing a terrifying suction force that devoured the void storm. And just at this moment, humph. A cold snort, filled with majesty reverberated, shaking the vast and endless void space. At the same time, Yu Ziyu's secondary roots swooshes towards the slender figure in white, one after another. They were not ordinary roots. They were Yu Ziyu's true weapons, each one possessing power equivalent to a tier 4 transcendent. Whereas the cosmic root that had transformed into a soaring purple python had strength above an intermediate level tier 4. Right now, more than a dozen of these roots were fiercely attacking. Boom, 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 terrifying shockwaves spread to thousands, even tens of thousands of kilometers, as the roots continuously adapted to suitable forms. Thanks to Yu Ziyu's innate talent, absolute evolution, he could maximize the potential of any analyzed mutant beast. Suddenly, a trumpet echoed through the void space as a war elephant, transformed from a root, lifted its forelimb and stomped fiercely towards that slender figure. On the other side, a root-turned flood dragon opened its gaping maws, its throat glowing with surging spiritual energy glow. In almost an instant, the area centered around that slender woman collapsed. The fabric of space sank, with ripples spreading through the void space. One after another, terrifying attacks rained down on the slender figure. Yu Ziyu never showed mercy to those who attacked him. If he could not win, he would simply flee, but someone who could leave only a 3-inch deep palm print on him with one slap was just courting death. Boom, 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 continuous explosions erupted around that slender figure. The terrifying assaults seemed endless, but at this moment, as if realizing something, Wuxia decided to open his heavenly eye. Immediately, boom, with a thunderous clap, a blood-red eye slowly opened near Wuxia's canopy, before a clearer world appeared before Wuxia. Immediately, he saw the slender figure trapped in endless attacks. However, the moment Wuxia laid his eyes on this figure, his pupils contracted. From the heavenly eye's perspective, the slender figure was standing calmly in the depths of the void space, completely unscathed, not even a single hair was out of place. It was as if her existence was an illusion. What was more astonishing was the increasingly bright hazy light around her, and the fact that her aura was growing more and more bizarre. She is not human. For some reason, this realization dawned on Wuxia, and he promptly focused his gaze on her. In a moment, a series of information flooded his mind. Race, unknown. Rank, unknown. Innate talent, mind development, all races use less than 10% of their brain capacity. Even the most terrifying races could only use no more than 20 to 30%. However, there exists a mysterious being that can unlock the limits of the brain's potential. This process, long yet short, can be accelerated under certain stimuli. Meanwhile, her power continues to grow until she becomes an unspeakable existence that is omniscient and omnipotent. Note, as she perceives every moment's change in the world, she gradually loses her humanity, becoming divine. Unique ability, vessel, an unspeakable existence's temporary vessel. After a deep glance, Wuxia slowly retracted his branches. He was not surprised by this and remained calm as always. Long, long ago, Wuxia had already had a premonition. The saying that humans have immortals isn't for nothing. With a sigh, Wuxia looked far into the distance at that sacred and indescribable being and shouted, "Stop." As if not hearing, the distant figure raised an arm again. "You should understand that you can't kill me now. Even if you forcibly unleash your power and erase me, before I die, I can erase the entire planet. By then, not to mention protecting the human race, even the plans you have laid out in the previous era will now miss a crucial piece." Recalling what this girl had said earlier about for protection, Wuxia immediately realized that she was a contingency left by the most unspeakable existence for the human race. Wuxia did not know how many such contingencies there were. After all, such an existence was beyond levels of strength that Wuxia could not even imagine. However, just knowing that she was a contingency left by that indescribable existence was enough. Because this way, there was room for negotiation in the balance of trade-offs. And at this moment, it seemed that Wuxia's words had an effect, as the distant figure slowly stopped its movements. "You, leave," the simple words, although somewhat awkward, accurately conveyed the meaning. Leave. A smile appeared on Wuxia's lips. He was simply unafraid. She was really terrifying, and the stronger she grew, the more she erased her own consciousness. In other words, upon reaching her peak, she would be the source consciousness of this universe. That would be really terrifying. After all, a universe could have two source consciousnesses. More importantly, she was protecting the human race. The development of the human race had just begun. As long as she was not pushed too hard, she would never erase Wuxia by sacrificing herself, simply because it was not worth it. It was definitely not worth sacrificing the future of the human race to eliminate a tree monster. "I can leave, but with your strength, you should understand who the true owner of this planet is now. So, without a certain price, it's very difficult to make me leave," after deliberating for a moment, Wuxia said half-jokingly. But despite his joking ting, his entire body tensed up instantly. Even his heartstrings were taut. Wuxia was on edge, he was ready to flee at the first sign of trouble. However, considering the entire planet was under Wuxia's control, he believed that his safety was assured. This gave him the confidence to bargain. Time slowly passed by. The distant girl seemed to be lost in thought. However, after a long while, just when Yu Ziyu's patience was nearly exhausted, a strand of crystalline hair floated gently towards him. This is a strand of the quintessence, sufficient for you to transform, even to reach tier 6, a faint voice echoed from afar, accompanied by the gradually disappearing figure of the girl. With a flick of his branch, Yu Ziyu caught the strand of hair, his eyes flickering with a sharp gleam. It worked, murmuring in his heart, Yu Ziyu began to retract his main body. Even the countless roots in Skyhaven slowly withdrew. Rumble, rumble, space around Skyhaven rippled once again, prompting countless people in Skyhaven to breathe a sigh of relief. Because the next moment the countless trees rising from the ground in Skyhaven began to wither, as if they had lost their vitality. However, upon closer inspection, it seemed that more than half of the resources in Skyhaven had disappeared. Even a few superhumans seemed to be missing. Although it was not advisable to go against that woman's wishes, Yu Ziyu believed that it would not be too much to take some gifts before leaving. Yu Ziyu only took 2 superhumans with him, one was the famous master of magnetism, Yule, and the other was a black man, Alan. Alan was the target simply because Ling Er detested him, so Yu Ziyu conveniently erased him from this world. At this time, if one were to look at Yu Ziyu's expression in the depths of the void space, they would find it to be grim. He was aware of that was contingency plans left by human immortals, but he had no idea that such a monstrosity would be a part of it. Damn! I almost got caught in this trap. Coldly smiling in his heart, a segment of Yu Ziyu's cosmic root moved. The next moment, deep within China, in the residence of the one aspiring to become the human emperor, rumble, accompanied by the trembling of earth, a segment of the cosmic root emerged out of thin air. Oh, suddenly, a surprised exclamation echoed in the room from the man inside. I managed to survive your contingency plan, stating in a cold voice. Yu Ziyu cast a deep glance at the unremarkable middle-aged man in the distant darkness. He was the one in actual control of China, known to be one of the top experts in China. However, not long ago, he almost died at Yu Ziyu's hands. After all, China did not need 2 rulers, one Ling Er was enough. Fortunately, he successfully managed to bargain his life using the so-called human race secrets. It seems that the contingency plan did not manage to kill you. In a regretful voice, an inexplicable bitterness blanketed the middle-aged man's face. He was supposed to dominate the world, but he had not anticipated encountering such a monster. In just a few years, this monster has already unraveled the mysteries of the soul and stepped into tier 5. What a monster! Sighing in his heart, the middle-aged man's gaze grew even more complex. My death would bring you no benefit. Besides, you mentioned that human immortals are not fond of your human emperor orthodoxy. Yu Ziyu stated with a cold and playful laugh, before his cosmic root disappeared from his residence, without waiting for the middle-aged man's response. It was no secret that the human race had immortals, but the contingency plan left behind by them was the greatest of the greatest taboos. However, according to this human emperor, the contingency plan had too many limitations. Among other things, the stronger the girl became, the more blurred her self-awareness became, which was evident. She was just a tool. Moreover, she could only act in times of human crisis. Of course, that was not the most important thing. The most crucial point was that immortals should not exist in this era, not even as a contingency plan. If her existence was exposed, the first to act would be the consciousness of cosmic source, and that would be truly catastrophic for her. Therefore, that girl's retreat was necessary. However, one unfortunate thing was, that girl, the figures by the chessboard seemed to have miscalculated by one step. For instance, Yu Ziyu was once an inheritor of Jinmu. Even though he had rejected the inheritance, the important fact was that he once had it. In other words, Yu Ziyu had the potential to contact heaven. With a cold laugh, Yu Ziyu used the void space to escape to the moon. Half a day later, dense mist covered the entire moon, submerging it in a sea of fog. Master, in a voice both affectionate and somewhat anxious, a sweet osmanthus tree gently swayed. We will catch up later, I have things to handle first. Gently stroking the sweet osmanthus canopy, Wuxia immediately focused his mind into the depths of his true form. At the same time, that green, crystalline long hair, or a strand of the quintessence to be precise, also submerged into the sea of spiritual energy. These strands of quintessence is truly terrifying. In the past, a strand of Jianmu's quintessence helped me perfect the 9 realms of heavens and step into Tier 5. What an extraordinary existence to create something like this. Sneering in his heart, Wuxia marveled at the power of that being, and its craftiness. He was certain of one thing: quintessence with a master still alive was not a good thing. Although he did not know what kind of methods that existence had, thinking from another perspective, Wuxia believed that if he was in that immortal's shoes, he definitely wanted to refine a divine entity like him into a puppet to protect the human race. This was not to say that Wuxia was a petty person underestimating others. Rather, it was just him being precautious. After all, caution was the parent to safety. So, whether you are plotting against me or not, you deserve to face whatever tribulation is coming for you. Coldly snorting in his heart, Wuxia drew the last trace of the Jianmu's quintessence from the depths of his true form. At that very moment, deep in the distant starry sky, boom, a thunderous clap shook the starry sky. The source of this was a divine tree rooted deep in the starry sky. Its branches were gently swaying, and its appearance resembled an ox. After a moment, it seemed to realize something. Humph! A cold snort full of apparent anger shook the starry sky. At this time, if one looked at the leaves of this divine tree, they would surely see the scene of Wuxia and that girl standing face to face. Moreover, and more importantly, that strand of the quintessence granted to Wuxia had crossed time and space, and appeared before the heaven-connecting Jianmu. The human race truly has great means. It seemed like admiration, yet also mockery. In the vast depths of the starry sky, space suddenly trembled as a cold, ruthless eye, covering the starry sky, appeared for a brief moment and then vanished. The majestic might of heaven, even if it was just for a fleeting moment, caused the entire starry sky to tremble. The unimaginable pressure not just shook the planets, but even the towering divine tree. Heavenly punishment is coming. Sighing, the heaven-connecting Jianmu turned his gaze towards the edge of the starry sky. With a sigh, the gaze of the sacred towering tree was drawn to the edge of the starry sky. There the consciousness of cosmic source was gathering, accompanied by a vast torrent of energy. Rumble, rumble, transcending space and even time, rivers of stars surged from the depths of the universe. At this moment, the entire Milky Way seemed to sense something and began to shake. What the hell? With a sudden look of shock on her face, a young girl in a white dress on a blue planet called Earth had a flash of confusion in her eyes. For some reason, just now, she felt an extreme sense of unease as if something terrifying was approaching. What's going on? In a state of confusion, the girl in the white dress looked like a frightened fawn, not knowing what to do. The next moment, loud bells started ringing in her mind as an inexplicable and terrifying aura suddenly broke out from her. Damn it! As she shouted, the entire earth trembled. Then, the bewildered snow gradually lost control of her body, followed by a brilliant light burst from her body, that shot straight towards the starry sky. It was so blinding that it resembled the sun, and could be seen from almost half of the planet in the solar system. However, more alarming than this brilliant light was the sky, not it should be called the starry sky. One after another, rivers of stars surged from the depths of the starry sky, converging into a vortex, and in the vast and expansive vortex, a cold and merciless eye appeared in a flash. This eye was so immense that every living being on earth could see it, but the moment they laid eyes on it, their minds shook violently. They stood rooted on their spot, as if frozen. Not just living beings, even wind, water, fire, everything seemed to be frozen. At this moment, time appeared to have stopped, with only that vast eye in the depths of the starry sky slowly opening. And as it continued to open, an increasingly terrifying pressure descended from the sky. Even Wuxia, far away on the moon, could not help but tremble. However, Wuxia was not human and had no legs. If it were any other being, they would likely have their knees on the ground, bowing deeply. Still, the terrifying pressure sapped all of Wuxia's will to resist. To think it provoked heavenly punishment, Wuxia sighed in his heart, somewhat shaken up. Though he had schemed against that unknown existence, he had not expected it to provoke heavenly punishment. Heavenly punishment was no trivial matter, it was the ultimate rejection by the heavenly Tao. Everyone was doomed in the face of heavenly punishment. They could forget about defying heaven. True heavenly punishment was unavoidable and unstoppable. Just looking at the rivers of stars flowing from the depths of the universe, weaving a vast vortex, was enough to imagine how terrifying heavenly punishment was. Why? Why? Suddenly, a roar echoed through space as a pillar of dazzling light shot out from a beautiful blue planet in the solar system, the Earth. At the center of this dazzling pillar of light was a blurred figure, standing silently. The figure, at this moment, was staring intently into the depths of the starry sky and shouted angrily, "How did you discover me?" Just as the figure inquired, a speculation flashed in the figure's mind, bringing a sudden change in his expression. It must be that tree monster, damn it. How could such an insignificant being have a direct connection to heaven? Amid the incredulous voice, Wuxia fiercely shook, because at this moment, he felt a cold gaze, filled with deep resentment, upon him, coming from space. Gazing deeply at the giant tree rooted on the moon, the vague figure seemed to have thought of something as the corner of his lips suddenly rose into a cold smile. "Good, very good. I didn't expect you to refuse the Jianmu inheritance. No wonder you could directly contact with heaven." Amidst a series of cold laughs, the corner of the vague figure's eyes twitched. What irony! He thought it was just an ant, and intended to refine it with a trace of quintessence to protect the human race. It never crossed his mind that this ant might have a direct line to heaven. In simpler terms, it was like bullying a child from a poor village, only to have that child bring the president. It was supposed to be an impossible scenario. After all, how could a kid from a poor village have such great connections that the president would intervene? Yet, this ant had done it and done it in a way that was 1,000 or even 10,000 times better. He had invited the consciousness of the cosmic source to settle accounts with him, a blacklisted entity. In a daze, the vague figure also smiled bitterly. After plotting for millions of years, he never thought he would fall at the hands of an ant helplessly. The vague figure also looked up at the sky. However, the next moment, his expression drastically changed as chains woven from the rivers of stars slowly emerged from the vast vortex. Clanging, the chains flew towards the vague figure like true dragons. The chains of heavenly Tao. In a somewhat incredulous voice, the vague figure's pupils contracted. Compared to other means, the last thing he wanted to see was the chains of heavenly Tao. Because, compared to heavenly tribulations or even lightning punishments, the chains of heavenly Tao trace back to one source, finding everything about him. His millions of years of planning would all be in vain. As a matter of fact, this body was just one of his 9 vessels scattered across the universe. The appearance of the chains of heavenly Tao meant that if this vessel fell, the others would likely be doomed as well. Thinking this, the vague figure did not hesitate and suddenly burst into thousands of lights, shooting in all directions. Yet compared to his speed, the chains emerging from the depths of the vortex of rivers of stars were faster, reaching the horizon in an instant, imprisoning beams of light. Then, there was no more then. After a long time, Wuxia only heard a shrill scream filled with great unwillingness, before his mind suddenly shook. Faintly, he saw a cold eye flash in his vision. Immediately after, a strand of crystalline hair slowly floated down before him. It seemed to fall unintentionally, yet it also appeared as a kind of gift. At the same time, in his 9 realms of heaven, the illusory Jianmu supporting the 9 space pockets also trembled. In a trance, an ancient yet majestic voice sounded in his ear, "This Jianmu bloodline is still incomplete. Today, I grant you this, to help you cultivate your own small worlds. At the drop of these words, the 9 space pockets shook violently, followed by the illusory Jianmu in the 9 space pockets gradually becoming substantial, growing thicker as if infused with some power. What is this? In bewilderment, Wuxia sensed an unprecedented change occurring in the 9 realms of heaven, thanks to his deep connection with them. As if in resonance, the 9 space pockets began shaking in unison. Rumble, rumble, a series of deafening rumbles echoed through the space pockets, as the sky rose higher and the earth sank deeper, as if the world was being recreated. In this world, there was a divine tree, resembling an ox, seemingly supporting the entire realm. Master, a dumbstruck 9 tails in the pocket of fire could not help but gently call out, her expression changing slightly. Looking up, the entire pocket of fire was churning, with tongues of flames flickering from the desert, giving birth to specks of flames, resembling sparks. At the core of the pocket of fire, a mass of fire attribute spiritual energy, resembling the sun, was continually shrinking. Every time it shrank a little, an increasingly terrifying high temperature surged through the pocket of fire. At the same time, if one looked another direction, towards the gray and misty edge of the pocket of fire, they would find it expanding outward, with massive amounts of earth attribute spiritual energy seeping in from the pocket of earth, forming a new continent. On another side, a chilling cold was spreading in. Looking closely, it was the pocket of ice, with towering icebergs moving in. However, as these icebergs entered the pocket of fire, the intense heat melted them, creating small ponds and even lakes. The 9 space pockets had long been interconnected, but such perfect resonance, with each pocket space opening to the others, was unprecedented. And the key reason for this? With a slight narrowing of his eyes, Wuxia gazed at the divine tree at the center of a space pocket. It was Jianmu, and not just any Jianmu. According to Wuxia's estimation, this was a second-generation Jianmu with the true bloodline of the heaven-connecting Jianmu. Compared to the majestic tree resembling an ox that he had once glimpsed, this Jianmu looked even stranger. It looked like a utility pole with a slender trunk piercing the clouds, devoid of any branches except for some twisted ones at the top. These branches happened to be twisted and coiled around each other, and its roots intertwined in a complex pattern. What was surprising was that the trunk resembled a snake. It was even shedding like a snake, with countless soft, snake skin-like bark pieces falling off when pulled. Even more astonishing to Wuxia was that the place where this Jianmu took root seemed to form its own realm, devouring all noise completely. The rest of the world was filled with noise, but when Wuxia's consciousness settled near this Jianmu, it was as if it had become dead silent. It has truly become an actual Jianmu. With a rare amazement in his voice, Wuxia's eyes shone with wonder. As a divine tree, Jianmu had 2 most mystical traits according to legend. 1. It cast no shadow. No matter the angle of sunlight, Jianmu would never have a shadow. The second was that Jianmu seemed to create its own realm, where all sound was absorbed. Standing atop it, no matter how much one yelled, the only response they would receive was dead silence. Now, with these 2 points in mind, Wuxia could confirm that his Jianmu had truly stepped from the illusory into reality, becoming a genuine Jianmu. This means that voice just now must have belonged to the heaven-connecting Jianmu. Murmuring to himself, Wuxia looked towards the distant starry sky. In a daze, he seemed to see a majestic tree, resembling an ox, rooted deep in the starry sky, smiling down at him. Thank you. Hearing this, a realization dawned on Wuxia. It must be because I had snitched to him. PFF. It was just a tip-off, but because of a tip about an illegal resident, I got rewarded. Wuxia's speculation was right, he had indeed received a reward from the consciousness of cosmic source and the heaven-connecting Jianmu because of the tip. However, this reward could not be directly given out by the consciousness of cosmic source. So, the responsibility fell upon the heaven-connecting Jianmu to distribute it. One reason was that the heaven-connecting Jianmu sensed the Jianmu in Yu's 9 realms of heaven and seized the opportunity to bestow upon Yu the bloodline of Jianmu, creating 9 second-generation Jianmus. Although these Jianmu were not as terrifying as the original, they still had genuine bloodlines with some of the same powers. In terms of aura, each Jianmu was comparable to a tier 4 existence. However, for some reason, none of these 9 Jianmu had developed sentience and acted more like tools. In fact, their presence was indeed akin to tools. They supported Yu's 9 space pockets and stabilized the geography. It was precisely because of this that Yu's 9 space pockets could expand so recklessly. Without them, Yu's 9 space pockets would have torn apart within moments of such unchecked expansion. This really satisfies my own goals. Yu was satisfied and excited. With these 9 second-generation Jianmus supporting the space pockets, Yu believed that 9 small worlds were not far off. He did not desire them to be very large, as long as he could truly establish small worlds that could generate spiritual energy on their own, they would keep on growing through repeated cycles. At that time, Yu would become increasingly terrifying due to the growth of his grand divine ability, the 9 realms of heaven. According to Yu's guess, even the heaven-connecting Jianmu had not realized that Yu's 9 space pockets were merely a part of the grand divine ability, the 9 realms of heaven. Otherwise, it would never have helped Yu perfect the 9 space pockets so easily. At least, it would not have acted like that. The 9 realms of heaven was the foundation of Yu's enlightenment to Tao. Its importance was self-evident. Nevertheless, in the end, through a series of fortunate mistakes, Yu had taken a significant step on the path to enlightenment to Tao. Yu took a long, deep breath to calm his excitement, before glancing at a nearby willow branch, which happened to be coiled around a crystalline long hair. The hair was translucent and was emitting a glow. Upon closer inspection, it was even more mysterious, with images faintly flashing within it. It was a strand of the quintessence bestowed upon Yu by that unspeakable existence. Originally, by leveraging his connection with the heaven-connecting Jianmu, he had submitted this strand of quintessence as evidence. Unexpectedly, the heaven-connecting Jianmu had returned it. Moreover, Yu sensed that this strand of quintessence seemed to have been refined. Simply put, it had become ownerless. This is the real great fortune. With a faint gleam in his eyes, a rare expression of ecstasy appeared on Yu's face. And why not? It was the quintessence, a true quintessence. More importantly, it was the quintessence of an immortal. Even if the immortal was a remnant of the past, its quintessence of life was still here. More importantly, this strand of quintessence was safe to use. At the very least, Yu no longer needed to worry about being schemed against, as he had earlier. After all, anyone else might plot against him, but the heavenly Tao was the least likely to do so. A slight smile appeared on Yu's lips as he began to explore the mysteries of this strand of quintessence through the system. However, he was uncertain if it would be successful. Not long ago, this quintessence had an owner, an unspeakable existence, an immortal. Though Yu was confident, he did not know what means an immortal might possess, and therefore did not dare to explore using it. But now, this strand of quintessence was ownerless, basically, it was harmless. With this thought, Yu's eyes narrowed slightly. In a moment, with a deafening clap in his mind, shaking him completely, a line of extremely profound and incomprehensible text appeared before Yu's eyes. These words were completely incomprehensible. However, as Tao is wordless, Yu clearly understood the meaning of this line. A strand of good fortune quintessence. The good fortune quintessence is formed when the grand divine ability, creating good fortune, has been cultivated to a certain step. The good fortune quintessence is the most mysterious. It can manipulate heaven and earth, perform wondrous creations, create something out of nothing, and bring life from death. There was not much explanation, yet it vividly elucidated the power of this quintessence. Sighing deeply, Wuxia suppressed the shock in his heart. No wonder humans had immortals. To think that they had mastered the most mysterious of the 36 grand divine abilities, creating good fortune, and even coalesced a strand of good fortune quintessence. As all kinds of emotions surged through his mind, Wuxia realized the true terror of that immortal. As a matter of fact, creating good fortune was ranked first among the 36 grand divine abilities of the previous era. According to legends, the progenitor of humans even used this grand divine ability to create the human race. Although it was just a legend, it nonetheless proved the terrifying nature of this grand divine ability to a certain extent. And now, a strand of good fortune quintessence condensed by this grand divine ability was right before Wuxia. This is truly a heaven-sent opportunity. Suppressing the excitement in his heart, Wuxia stared fixedly at the crystal-clear strand of hair. At this moment, he began calculating various ways to use this strand of good fortune quintessence. I can use it to assist in my breakthrough. The energy within this strand of good fortune quintessence is more than enough to push me to the peak of Tier 5 if not Tier 6. But, using it that way would be the greatest waste. It would squander much of the mystical nature of this strand of good fortune quintessence. I need to think of another, better method. At the thought of this, his eyes could not help but flicker. Finally, gritting his teeth, he resolved himself and made a decision. If possible, I should be able to refine this strand of good fortune quintessence into my body, thereby granting my body a bit of the power of good fortune. This would be the best choice, muttering to himself. A determined glint appeared deep in Wuxia's eyes. However, such refining also bore the greatest risk. After all, Wuxia could not guarantee the current state of that immortal, or whether he could even fuse with this strand of good fortune quintessence. Nevertheless, after a moment, he threw all concerns to the back of his mind. Too much thinking would only be hindering me from achieving great things. A resolute heart is necessary to take on Tao. I should just keep going, unwaveringly. With this in mind, Wuxia wrapped the crystal-clear strand of hair with a branch and slowly drew it into his body. Boom. Suddenly, a tremor passed through Wuxia's body. The tremor affected not just Wuxia's body, it even affected Wuxia's soul. At this moment, if Wuxia could observe his true self, he would surely find that his true form had begun to undergo another metamorphosis. His roots stretched slowly towards the voice, giving out roars that resembled dragon roars. Wuxia's secondary roots were slowly transforming into giant pythons. The roots slowly took the shape of snakes, their ends transformed into snake heads, and fine scales appeared on them. However, the most important was their long and icy snake pupils. However, this was not the end, because as these 81 roots transformed into giant pythons, the largest and most robust among them, the soaring purple python that Wuxia often used, gave out a long, piercing roar. Roar. Giving out a dragon-like roar, the purple python was slowly changing its form. Its snake pupils became more majestic. Its fine scales gradually became more and more detailed, growing to the size of a palm. Its long and smooth tail even sprouted some fur. It had transformed into a dragon, albeit only a flood dragon, but a true metamorphosis, nonetheless. After all, it was transforming from python to flood dragon. To a certain extent, it also meant the further refinement of Wuxia's secondary roots. From python to flood dragon, it was the evolution in the hierarchy of life. Of course, this was a manifestation of its power, similar to how one's appearance would be affected after training. In fact, if Wuxia really wanted to transform his secondary roots into flood dragons, he could do so with spiritual energy. This was happening naturally, without him doing anything. To simply put it, if Wuxia's secondary roots were once iron, they were now steel, tempered steel. It was a true metamorphosis of hierarchy. As for the so-called python and flood dragon, there were just appearances, manifestation of the skyrocketing of power. Roots were still roots. The only change happening was in the hierarchy of life. Roar, roar, one dragon roar followed after another, and all 81 of Yu's secondary roots began to transform from pythons into flood dragons. However, the biggest metamorphosis was still happening to Yu's primary root. Whether it was an illusion or not, when the strand of good fortune quintessence merged with his true form, the dormant green dragon primary root trembled. Although this trembling was faint and almost imperceptible, it was still noticed by sweet Osmanthus, for she had always been paying attention to Yu. Master seems to be getting more terrifying. Gazing into the depths of the sky, sweet Osmanthus focused her gaze below the giant tree that was rooted in void space. There, a green dragon was coiled together like a snake. Although its eyes were tightly closed, the indescribable dragon's prestige made one's heart tremble with fear. Right now, whether it was an illusion or not, sweet Osmanthus felt that the dragon's prestige was becoming more terrifying. As the dragon's prestige grew stronger and more majestic, thick clouds rolled in the space above the moon, plunging the daytime-like moon into boundless darkness in the blink of an eye. The clouds were so heavy and dense that it seemed that they would crush space itself. The oppressive pressure made it hard to breathe. Lightning tribulation, raising his eyelids, Yu glanced towards the depths of the space where massive tribulation clouds were gathering. Yu calmed himself down once again. It was related to him. Although this was his tribulation, it was not because it was a breakthrough in the realm, rather it was because of the gestation of a true sacred being. Now that the lightning tribulation had arrived, the sacred being would naturally protect its master. With this in mind, Yu naturally would waste his thoughts on getting through the tribulation. Instead of expending extra effort on the tribulation, he decided it would be best use of this time to understand the profound mysteries of the good fortune quintessence, solidifying his foundation for future accumulation and breakthroughs. Just then, as if sensing the lightning tribulation from heaven, roar, 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 amidst a series of razors, the 81 secondary roots transformed flood dragons showed an instinctual unease. Among them, some were even howling, seemingly attempting to charge towards the lightning tribulation. However, before they could move forward, boom, accompanied by a loud and shrill swoosh, a purple flood dragon elongated its body, coiling around Yu's main body. Round after round, it wrapped around Yu's main body, as if guarding. The purple flood dragon was none other than the soaring purple python that Yu used the most. Compared to the others, this secondary root was exceptionally powerful. Its endlessly stretching body was adorned with shimmering purple scales, exuding a cold and glossy sheen. A head resembling that of a dragon slowly emerged from Yu's massive canopy, roaring towards the lightning tribulation. It seemed like a warning, yet also a threat. As Yu's strongest secondary root, it was essential for it to guard. However, at this moment, crackle. A bolt of lightning as thick as a water bucket came down, causing the purple flood dragon's pupils to contract. Immediately, its palm-sized scales flipped over instantly, as if it was angry. However, the next moment, before the purple flood dragon could attack, roar, another roar, resembling a dragon roar, reverberated through the entire moon, filling the silent world with an inexplicable majesty. At the moment this dragon roar sounded, all 81 secondary roots, including the most dominant purple root, trembled violently. Immediately after, they all drooped down. Accompanied by a tremendous roar, a streak of green light shot towards the tribulation clouds. The next moment, the bolt of lightning coming down struck the streak of green light, causing it to flicker a little. An extremely loud and deafening clap, as if the sky was ripped apart, reverberated through space. The moment the two came in contact, sweet Osmanthus truly saw the true form of the streak of light. It was an azure dragon, seemingly endless, continuously emerging from Yu's roots, swiftly ascending towards the sky. Boom, accompanied by another deafening thunderclap, bolts of lightning interwove above the azure dragon's head, making its imposing manner even more terrifying. Roar, In response, the azure dragon gave a long and vast roar as it flew into the depths of the tribulation clouds. Immediately, endless bolts of lightning streaked continuously within the immensely thick tribulation clouds, as if intending to destroy the azure dragon. However, it was welcomed by the azure dragon with an even more excited roar. The dragon roar was long, seemingly joyful. Vaguely, even sweet Osmanthus could see the massive azure dragon freely traversing within the dense tribulation clouds, like a fish in the sea, a bird soaring into the sky. The depths of the tribulation clouds had become the sanctuary of the azure dragon. Though intermittently visible, one could see the greenish-blue scales on its body, the size of an average human, shimmering faintly with a subtle luster under the flashes of lightning. Tribulation arose and dissipated. From the time the tribulation arrived and dissipated, only half an hour had passed. And in this half an hour, Wuxia's aura had strengthened to an extreme level. It was unreserved strengthening. No, to be more precise, Wuxia had no control over it. His fearsome aura was uncontrollably spreading in all directions, making the air heavy. Tier 5. No, that would be far too modest. Ah! In a daze, sweet Osmanthus on the moon slowly lifted her gaze, as a giant tree rooted in space entered her eyes. 9 vortexes, presenting different colors, swirled around the tree, stirring up massive storms of spiritual energy. They greedily devoured endless spiritual energy, like a feast. At the crown of the tree, numerous glowing willow branches fluttered like mystical divine chains. However, compared to all this, the greatest and most shocking transformation lay below. There laid an azure dragon, much, much larger than Wuxia's own body. The azure dragon, growing out from Wuxia's roots, coiled round and round his tree body, with its head unmistakably visible at the highest point of the crown, with dragon whiskers, resembling rootlets, growing out from under its nose. Each dragon whisker gleamed with a jade-like radiance. Its glistening dragon pupils shimmered with a faint greenish glow. And if one looked closely at the dragon's forehead, they would notice a bloody scar on its forehead, appearing every now and then. If one were to look into its dragon pupils, they would be surprised to see the reflection of Wuxia's true form deep within them. Is this my current, true complete form? A deep and resonant voice unlike Wuxia's mental transmissions emanated from the azure dragon's mouth. Seeming somewhat unaccustomed, Wuxia once again directed his consciousness to another part of his true form, a branch. And now, through the perspective of this branch, Wuxia seriously appraised his current appearance. His tree body, rooted in space, was surrounded by the azure dragon, its dragon head protruding from the crown, and 9 colorful vortexes swirling around it. There seems to be an inexplicable majesty. In contemplation, Wuxia gave a thoughtful evaluation. He was not praising himself, rather, it was the azure dragon, transformed from his primary root, that was truly terrifying. After all, the azure dragon transformed from Wuxia's primary root was a true dragon, with dragon prestige surpassing ordinary dragons by several times, or even dozens of times. It could even be said that Wuxia's azure dragon, aside from its appearance and aura resembling a dragon, far surpassed ordinary dragons in other aspects, because this azure dragon was a sacred spirit. A naturally born sacred being, nurtured by the heavens and earth, without a father nor a mother. And such an existence was a naturally born sacred being. Its strength and divinity were beyond the comprehension of others. Naturally born sacred being, these 4 words could not be used lightly. In the previous era, if the natural-born sacred beings did not die prematurely, they could grow into titans. They even had high chances of becoming hegemons, even possible eternal realm experts. Hiya, taking a deep breath, Wuxia suppressed the excitement in his heart. He had not expected that refining this strand of good fortune quintessence would grant him such a good opportunity, an opportunity that would actually transform the primary root into a true dragon, the azure dragon. Azure dragon, a naturally born sacred being, as the primary root and wielding the power of vitality, was the foundation of Wuxia. Originally, it was the most fragile part of Wuxia's roots, but now, it had become the strongest part of Wuxia. Roar, as Wuxia's consciousness entered into Azure Dragon's body, a long roar, akin to a dragon, reverberated through the space, with mighty sound waves surging in all directions, visible to the naked eye. At the same time, whether it was an illusion or not, when Wuxia's consciousness controlled this Azure Dragon's body, an indescribable feeling surged into his mind. In a trance, the world came alive. Countless streams of spiritual energy rushed towards his body, towards the body of his Azure Dragon. More importantly, in the dragon claws under his abdomen, he saw a ball of green glow manifesting, with all streams of spiritual energy converging into it. Whoosh, amidst howling winds as a result of torrents of spiritual energy, the green glow grew bigger and bigger, instantly transforming into a green energy sphere. And the moment it manifested, a fearsome aura spread into the surroundings. Unique ability, Divine Energy Sphere, continuously gathers spiritual energy imbued with vitality, and also adds a rotational flow of fearsome speed, creating a terrifying ball of energy. The more spiritual energy accumulates, the more terrifying its power becomes. Because it carries the power of vitality, it possesses several times, even dozens of times, the lethality power against dark and undead creatures than any other means. Glancing deeply at the swirling ball of energy in the dragon claws, Wuxia narrowed his eyes slightly. This basketball-sized ball of energy was powerful enough to wipe out half of a continent, and it was not an exaggeration. This was Wuxia's confidence as a Tier 5. Moreover, he was not just an ordinary Tier 5 now. Not mentioning the fact that his primary form was that of an immortal tree, just the Azure Dragon transformed from primary root was a naturally born sacred being. Aside from other naturally born sacred beings, there weren't many in his peers who could match the edges he had. Coupled with Wuxia's main body identity as the immortal tree, Wuxia could confidently say he was invincible among peers. He could even shake and confront Tier 6 transcendence. His eyes narrowed slightly as a confident expression appeared on Wuxia's face. Now at the peak of the Tier 5, the 9 realms of heaven are expanding at a visible speed. If nothing unexpected happens, my combat power will undergo a qualitative change in a short time, muttering to himself, Wuxia increasingly realized his own terror. As a matter of fact, this was still not the most pleasing aspect. The most pleasing thing was that, he had disappeared, the remnant immortal. Raising his eyes, Wuxia looked deeply at Earth. The super terrifying aura that gave him palpitation was now nowhere to be found. Since the consciousness of the cosmic source took action, a complete annihilation was set in stone. Even if he had not been completely eradicated, that remnant immortal would have been sealed until the end of the era. After all, immortals were existences that were far stronger than everyone and could disrupt balance. Such a thing was absolutely intolerable to the consciousness of the cosmic source. I should be truly invincible now, lightly chuckling, Wuxia affirmed his position on Earth. However, just at that moment, as if remembering something, Wuxia's gaze suddenly turned towards a nearby area, where stood a silver-white tree, resembling a cold and serene woman. Sweet Osmanthus, Wuxia's third apostle. Now, having absorbed moonlight on the moon, she had successfully grown into a Tier 4 transcendent. As he looked, he saw the branches of the sweet Osmanthus tree gently swaying amidst the mist. She seemed to be expressing respect and joy. Master, tenderly calling out, the distant sweet Osmanthus bower and congratulated, congratulations, Master, for advancing further to new heights. Girl, you sure are quite the smooth talker. Pursing his lips, Wuxia revealed a hint of a smile. She was indeed quite impressive. Just a while ago, she, calling out to Wuxia from the distant moon, and then plotted against Moon Barbarian. That was but just a glimpse of her abilities. Although she was inexperienced in worldly matters, thanks to her inheritance, she had her own understanding of everything. However, Yuziyu could easily tell that although she pretended to be mature, she was actually quite pure and innocent. In Yuziyu's opinion, she was like a delicate little princess. Hee, grinning, Yuziyu focused his gaze before a series of information caught his eyes. Race, immortal sweet osmanthus tree rank, tier, for innate talent, immortal body. If rooted in a place rich in moonlight, she possesses an immortal body that can regenerate endlessly, never dying. And every time she regenerates, the body becomes tougher. Unique ability, attracting moonlight, it allows her to gather spiritual energy mixed with some strange energy, and use it for self-defense and offense. Moonlight guard, she can neutralize most negative effects. Moonlight projection, she can project herself using moonlight. After going through her status, Yuziyu finally understood why sweet osmanthus was called the divine tree. He had not expected that once she was rooted on the moon, in a place rich in moonlight, she would actually possess an immortal body. Although this immortal body could be easily overcome either by destroying the moon itself or uprooting her completely, one thing was certain, sweet osmanthus tree truly lived up to her reputation as a divine tree. Furthermore, this moon was too weak. If she was on the legendary lunar star, rooted there, she might truly possess an immortal body. As for the so-called moonlight, according to Yuziyu's understanding, it was the famous lunar energy from the previous era. Although this moon also had lunar energy, it was too thin. After mixing with spiritual energy to become moonlight, it could only help sweet osmanthus grow. It was insufficient to truly transform her. If there's a chance, I could make plans for this little girl on each planet rich in moonlight. Murmuring to himself, Yuziyu began to strategize for the future of sweet osmanthus. However, at this moment, as if thinking of something, Yuziyu's gaze also turned towards the distant beautiful blue planet. Earth, Yuziyu's home planet. On his home planet, Yuziyu had already harvested 4 continents. Among them, he had forcefully subdued most of the powerful transcendents in Africa and Australia. As for the other continents, narrowing his eyes slightly, a smirk flashed on Yuziyu's lips. Moments later, boom, boom, the vortexes around Yuziyu's tree body started shaking before figures began to emerge from them, one after another. Greetings, Master. Greetings, Master. In unison, 9 tails, bull demon, white tiger, these fearsome beings of tier 4, known as natural disasters, all bowed their heads. However, maybe they were shocked and astounded by Yuziyu's current appearance. Yuziyu could see a sense of terror deep in their eyes. Hee, chuckling, Yuziyu directly asked, "Now, how are things in each of the pocket spaces?" Hearing Yuziyu's question, 9 tails, with spiritual energy surging and enveloped by a faint red halo, stepped forward first. The faint halo around her was the spiritual energy barrier. As tier 4 transcendents, their survival in outer space depended on it. Although with evolution, their dependence on the environment had weakened, the environment like outer space where Yuziyu was rooted was still lacking a few things. Therefore, the use of spiritual energy barriers was particularly important. However, it also confirmed another speculation of Yuziyu's. In battles across the stars, only beings like natural disasters and those above them were worthy of being dispatched. Master, the pocket of fire is expanding extremely rapidly now. Every moment, it trembles. What's even more terrifying is that the fire attribute spiritual energy is increasing at a visible speed. Yuziyu's eyes brightened up after hearing Nine Tails' report. He immediately shifted his consciousness to the pocket of fire to take a look. Just as Nine Tails had reported, the entire pocket of fire now resembled a furnace. Occasionally, sparks of fire could even be seen igniting over the deserts in the pocket of fire. It was a phenomenon, the phenomenon of the birth of spiritual energy. In other words, the pocket of fire had already matured enough to generate its own spiritual energy. This was the hallmark of it soon becoming a small world. However, for the pocket of fire to truly grow into a small world, it would still take a long time. Just like all things, it required accumulation. Now, all Wuxia could do was wait. Of course, planting some fire attribute spirit plants could also accelerate this growth. At the thought of this, Wuxia's eyes grew even deeper. With nearly half of Earth's resources supporting my 9 realms, I should be able to significantly shorten this process. As he pondered, Wuxia made up his mind. In cultivation, resources were indispensable. With grand divine abilities like the 9 realms of heaven, Wuxia's demand for resources became urgent. Just his own growth alone would deplete nearly half of Earth's resources. One could imagine how terrifying this was. However, flowing out in a trickle takes a long time to exhaust. If Wuxia kept harvesting again and again like this, Earth would indeed satisfy Wuxia's needs for a long time. More importantly, Wuxia had already discovered another planet with life. Earth was Wuxia's home planet, and he held some sentimental attachment to it. As such, he was unwilling to exhaust its resources. As for other planets with life, a cold smile crept onto Wuxia's lips, not hiding the greed on his face. First, I should take care of our home base, Earth, then plan for the other planet with life. Thinking this, Wuxia made his decision. In the past, he would not have dared, but things had changed since his main body had merged with that strand of the good fortune quintessence. For one, his strength had skyrocketed. Although he had just grown to the peak of Tier 5, the true extent of his power, even Wuxia himself was not entirely clear about. However, he was certain about one thing: once he had truly mastered the current form completely, his strength would definitely be truly extraordinary. Wuxia believed that if, even with such strength, he failed to suppress a planet smaller than Earth, then all his time cultivating would have just been a waste, or he had just cultivated himself into nothing more than a waste. Taking a deep breath and clearing his mind, Wuxia turned his gaze towards 9 Tails, Bull Demon, and other mutant beasts, and stated without mincing his words, "Later, I will be opening a passage from the moon to Earth using the cosmic roots as a medium. You'll then be going to Earth to assist Ling Er." At this point, Wuxia seemed to remember something and timely reminded, "While you're at it, you should keep 2 things in mind. First, do not unify the continents. A healthy competition can keep the entire Earth vibrant and lively. Secondly, regularly harvest various forbidden zones and secret places of the continents. I need a large amount of resources." Calmly hearing Wuxia's instructions, 9 Tails, Bull Demon and the other mutant beasts looked at each other before nodding their understanding in succession. "Yes, Master." However, just then, as if remembering something, 9 Tails also raised her eyes and looked at Wuxia's current complete form. Tree and dragon. A combination of the two. With 9 huge vortexes surrounding it, 9 Tails could not help but find Wuxia's current form quite oppressive, and this was still when Wuxia was doing his very best to forcefully restrain his aura. Taking in deep breath and suppressing the shock in her heart, 9 Tails also took the initiative to ask, "Master, what should we do about the humans?" Humans, the former masters of Earth, were still a dominant force in the current world. Compared to other races, who stuck with their own herd, the unity of humans in the face of external enemies was definitely the most daunting. Moreover, humans had been flourishing on Earth for many years. Their foundation was extremely strong compared to others. Humans would undoubtedly be a significant obstacle in the attempt to suppress the entire planet. Humans, murmuring to himself, the corner of Wuxia's lips rose, showing a hint of playful expression. In terms of understanding humans, he was probably second to none here. Precisely because of this, he knew all too well about the flaws of humans. "As for humans, I have my own arrangements, you don't need to worry." Saying this, Wuxia's mind couldn't help but think of a few words. Faith, power, and the so-called war. Throughout history, these words have been inseparable from humans. Each one of them is a pretty good means to control humans. If these methods are used well, then I might become the biggest, hidden hand, behind the entire Earth. In outer space around the moon, suddenly, with tremors visible to the naked eye, space shattered like a mirror. At the moment of fragmentation, a purplish root surged out from within. The root appeared surreal and was covered in a purplish sheen that did not reflect or radiate any light yet glowed. Looking along this section of purple root, looking into the depths of the void, one could see the root seeming endless, stretching directly to the beautiful blue planet, Earth. Go, commanding, Wuxia greeted with a nod to Nine Tails, Bull Demon, and other mutant beasts. Yes, Master, promptly replying, Nine Tails took the first step forward, heading towards the rift in space. Tap, 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 waves of flames rolled through space as Nine Tails made her way to Wuxia's cosmic root before rushing towards the other end. Following her, one after another, natural disaster-class transcendents began to pour into the crack. Master, can we really reach Earth this way? Suddenly, a psychic transmission rang in Wuxia's mind. Of course. Wuxia glanced at the source of the transmission, the curious sweet osmanthus, and explained, a section of my cosmic roots is present in Misty Mountains. And with every section connected to each other, these guys can walk straight to Earth, like ascending on the stairway to heaven. Just as these words escaped Wuxia's lips, he could not help but be slightly stunned. Unknowingly, he had assumed the role of Jianmu. In legends, Jianmu bridged the gap between heaven and earth. If an expert wanted to descend to the mortal realm, they would need to follow Jianmu all the way down. Currently, Wuxia was playing a similar role, where earth was like the mortal realm and moon was akin to heaven. As for his cosmic roots, they had become bridges connecting heaven and earth. However, this bridge was dangerous, only beings of natural disaster class could tread it. But with Wuxia's protection, safety was assured. If possible, I can try to make the moon into a celestial realm, and then wait for powerful transcendence from Earth to ascend one by one, eventually conquering the stars with me. In the midst of his contemplation, Wuxia gradually formed a plan that was not too mature but seemed feasible. After a while, Wuxia shook his head to dispel his thoughts. There is no need to hurry, I still have a lot of time on my hands. The great era has just begun. It would take a long time for powerful individuals to emerge in large numbers. At this moment, as if remembering something, Wuxia also opened the pocket of mist. Boom, 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 accompanied by tremors in space, a vortex filled with white mist suddenly shook violently, eventually revealing a space filled with dense mist. And deep within this space pocket stood countless mist beasts, resembling kangaroos, in rows like an army. They looked exceptionally daunting and majestic. Not far from these mist beasts stood two mist beasts, much larger and stronger, and golden in color. They were the Light and Dark King, extremely difficult opponents. As the pocket of mist expanded, they grew even stronger. However, more shocking than this endless army of mist beasts was what lay deep within the pocket of mist, a figure wearing a helmet and a red cape. This was a human, and a remarkable and powerful one at that. Even now, countless chains of mist were keeping his body tied down, yet this could not erase the proud look in his eyes. Faintly, one could see countless fine electric arcs crackling around his body. He was Yule, the master of magnetism, the pride of America, a superhuman renowned for his strength in the top 10 among humans. Even more terrifying was his ability to control magnetism. In the universe, the universally recognized four fundamental forces are electromagnetism, gravitational force, strong nuclear force, and weak nuclear force. They constitute this universe and are also the most powerful forces in nature known to humans. As the master of magnetism, the fact that he could control magnetism indirectly implied his ability to handle powerful forces like electromagnetism. Therefore, compared to others, Yule caught Wuxia's attention, simply because some time ago, Wuxia felt a probing gaze. Wuxia reckoned that the owner of that gaze was this guy. With a playful smile, Wuxia also fixed his gaze on the master of magnetism. At this moment, it seemed, seemingly sensing Wuxia's gaze, Yule let out a heart-wrenching roar, grimacing in fury, you freaking bastard. His eyes were bloodshot, and it seemed as if, given the chance, he would devour Wuxia right then and there. Bastard! Chuckling coldly, Wuxia retorted with a hint of amusement, survival of the fittest, survival of the fittest. A bitter smile appeared on Yule's face. He had nothing to retort. Having reached his level, he naturally would not engage in pointless arguments. However, he was unwilling, deeply unwilling. He could not accept the fact that the final glory of the human race was extinguished under his hand. He blamed himself for gathering all the prodigies of the human race, and making them ensnared by the tree monster. He hated himself. He resented himself. Everything is my fault. Deep in self-blame, his bloodshot eyes welled up. Yet, just then, a voice suddenly rang in his ear, I didn't kill them. Except for you and another natural disaster-class superhuman, I have spared the others. Wuxia's calm and faint voice was full of playfulness, yet it startled Yule. Are you serious? Seeming somewhat incredulous, Yule's voice was hoarse and trembling. Do you think I would lie? Saying so, Wuxia sounded helpless. At the time, that remnant immortal's contingency had intervened. So, he really did not have the time to make a move, nor did he dare to. However, that might not be the case in the future. If can't be used, a natural disaster class expert is ultimately a threat. But, as if realizing something, Wuxia looked at the master of magnetism, who was still in disbelief, continued, not acting now doesn't mean I won't act against humanity in the future. With a hint of threat, Wuxia's voice turned cold. What do you want me to do? In just an instant, Yule seemed to have sensed the hidden meaning behind his words, and promptly asked. It's very simple. Wuxia's eyes narrowed slightly. Moments later, amidst Yule's astonishment and suspicion, a blood-red mark, hovering in the air, appeared deep in the pocket of mist. Accept this blood-red mark. Make a pact with me and become my fourth apostle. In exchange, as long as humans don't provoke me, I won't lift a finger against them. You're tuning into the Han Lee's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.